Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please join with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I need a motion to approve the agenda for the business meeting of August 14th, 2023.
Okay, I have Eric and Jim.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Open forum. So we have the 30-minute open forum is the time the board sets aside to hear in-person comments from the public. Comments may also be emailed in advance of the meeting prior to 4 p.m. on the date of the meeting, and state in the email if you would like your correspondence read out loud to Daphne Pearson, District Clerk, at pearsond@greenvillecsd.org. This is an opportunity for residents to voice general concerns or compliments, especially about items on the agenda. However, this is not the time to register complaints about specific individuals or items that should be addressed confidentially through the proper channels. All comments shall be addressed to the District Clerk and shall be limited to not more than 5 minutes per Board Policy 2180. Please note the members of the board may not be able to directly respond to citizens' concern during the public open forum. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Do we have any emails?
We do not.
So then I'm going to move us on. We have a public hearing, district-wide school safety plan public hearing. I'm going to turn it over to our superintendent, Mike Bennett.
Yeah, so this was,
Microphone.
so this is the point in the, our meeting where if there's any questions, this had gone out. It was, we had Craig Hansen and Tracy Kathapal come in and present the district-wide safety plan a couple of meetings ago. We posted for 30 days, and this is an opportunity for any questions. There is, as we take a look at our district-wide teams, making sure that we got some late information from Questar to make sure that we have a parent representation from a parent organization needs to be on our list. So we will look to make sure we get someone from PTA. So if there's no other questions or concerns in regards to the safety plan, we will be looking to vote on that later in this meeting.
Okay. All right, so then moving us along for presentations, we have the end of the year data report by the administrative team. Please join us as they set up.
And if I could just take a moment, I know that our team is a little short, we got some vacations, but I do want to take this opportunity to welcome Melissa Macaluso, our new K-12 principal. Melissa joined us on July 31st and has hit the ground running, I think literally. She has made her way across the district, getting to know the faculty or the folks who are here. We do have some advantage with Melissa coming into this role. Melissa has previously worked at Questar 3 as a resident expert on special education at RTI and has worked with a number of school districts within the Questar 3 BOCES. So she's had the opportunity to work with some of our faculty and staff in the past with professional development, but she's also worked for, I believe, 11 or 12 other school districts at least through her time. I will tell you that I know I'm not supposed to talk about interviews, but one of the things that really stood out with Melissa was not only how familiar she was with our school district, but she had an opportunity to go to many spots. If you've been paying attention, the pipeline for finding new, good qualified candidates for teaching or administration is difficult. But Melissa said something that really hit home, was that working here in Greenville through her work with Questar, she really felt as though there was a family and a culture climate of this with our faculty who are really passionate about the work that they were doing, their willingness to try new things, and the structure. So she said she didn't apply anywhere else. I believe that. And she applied to Greenville, and we were very happy she did. So Melissa will be taking part in future presentations, so you're getting off easy tonight, Melissa, but I wanted the board to at least put a face with the name and welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I look forward to working with all of you, and I've had a great, this is going on my 3rd week now, and it's just been wonderful. So,
All right.
I get kicked out of the building at 3:30, I'm like, what? I need to
All right, at this point, we'll turn it over to Matt and the team.
Before you do that, Matt, if I could just mention one thing. According to the calendar, the presentation was supposed to be earlier, but given a lot of things on everyone's plate, a decision was made to move it to the August meeting, so there would be time to kind of go through all of the information accordingly. So, thank you.
Could I interrupt with a quick question? It's just a procedural question, which I should remember, but don't. For the hearing on the safety plan, I know Mike announced it, but do we need to do anything else? Discussion, questions, anything?
And it asked if there was any question that anybody had around that, and then there was quiet.
Sorry, I missed.
So I assumed that there was none, and then we would be voting on it.
That clearly was my mistake, so thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
With the interruption.
Okay, good evening, everybody. How are you? So this evening, we will be providing an update for you on the continuous school improvement work that took place over the 22-23 school year. And as part of that conversation, we'll be reviewing some of the data that we've used for measuring our success. Carrie, I'm going to go to slide 3. You'll recognize tonight that we'll be keeping the same format that we typically use for end of the year presentations. We'll begin with a quick review of our school improvement calendar, and then move on to district goals and the importance of multiple measures. Then we'll move on into providing some highlights from each of the 3 district goals. And please, with each section of the presentation, feel free to ask any questions, and we will work on either answering them or taking notes so that we can find an answer for you. There will also be time at the end for additional questions. Just a quick walkthrough of the materials that you have. I believe in your data binders, you should have received updated copies of the building profiles for the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school, as well as the evidence of completion documents for the district comprehensive improvement plan, for the elementary, middle school, and high school comprehensive education plans. Those packets include much more data than we will be presenting tonight. And it can be reviewed for more detailed information, and we are always available for clarification or questions on anything you have in those data profiles. So looking backwards, district goals from 22-23. So we're going to be looking actually at this presentation at the 22-23 school year, and then in a few minutes we'll be looking forward toward the 23-24 school year. But just to recap, in each of our goal areas, curriculum, culture, and community, we had some priorities that we wanted to highlight. So under Goal 1 of curriculum, last year we were working to build the capacity to use data for instructional purposes. We were also working on a systematic implementation of high leverage instructional practices. Moving towards culture, again, systemic implementation, but then best practices that are related to encouraging student attendance. And then with community, as we want to partner with our families in the larger community to serve our students, the focus across the schools in the district was on aligning communication processes and the tools that we use for those. So just a reminder of what the goals were during the 22-23 school year. Jumping back to our calendar, Tracy noted this, that we are a little bit off of calendar and adjustments were made. And so I appreciate everybody making those adjustments, and here we find ourselves in August. So if we could begin with just a broad look at some of the highlights that took place, or some of the things that happened related to curriculum, our goal 1, during the 22-23 school year. I'd like to begin with some of the work that happened around curriculum mapping. Time was devoted during superintendent's conference days and collaborative release time to help make progress towards completing maps in the core areas, as well as scope and sequence and pacing guides. In addition to that, in the instructional area, we really want to emphasize the work that was done this year for systematic and explicit phonics instruction. It was full second year of our really great reading implementation, and so for students who are receiving special class reading as part of their IEPs, grades K through 12, they are using really great reading. We are using really great reading now for Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention for the elementary school and up into some of the middle school grades. And last year we expanded really great reading into Tier 1 instruction in grades 3 through 5, and plans and work that we've been doing with the coaches is going to be moving that down here as we look forward towards the future into the primary grades. I think all of this work that I just noted, I have to point out our next bullet there, the instructional coaches. They played an important part, a vital role in making all of those things that I just discussed happen, and their value, as has been presented to you already, has been noted.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the next 3 bullets. Rural Schools Project, that's NKERN, that's typically what we use when we talk about that as well too. This is the end of one of our cycles coming up, but this past year we focused on post-secondary checklists. This was really exciting for our counselors, for Lynn Hughes, who does senior seminar, and just to get some feedback from these checklists. So I think everyone knows Lynn Hughes teaches senior seminar. She gets kids prepared for what comes next. Prior to using these checklists, the majority of the focus has been on secondary education, post-secondary education, and she always thought she did a really good job focusing on careers as well too. Well, what we did was we aligned these checklists with what Lynn was already doing in her classrooms, and it literally just created like a checklist. So we put these checklists in Naviance, which all of our students use. It hosts not only these checklists, but it hosts their transcripts, their college essays. These are what gets sent to colleges when they're ready to apply. But we put even the post-secondary checklists for those going into the military, those going into right into the career workforce. We put all of these right in there, and that way we could assign students to-do lists throughout their semester in senior seminar. So we had a lot of great feedback. Everything is stored in one place rather than Lynn having to run all around and trying to figure out what works best. And Rural Schools Projects is continuing on with this for next year. So I think it's in October, we all get together with all the other rural schools and we talk about feedback and we get to learn from one another. And I think that's one of the most important things about Greenville being part of the Rural Schools Project, is that we get to hear what other schools are doing, other rural schools, because there's very little research out there on rural schools, and we get to learn from one another. The next bullet is our new CTE pathways. As you recall, I think I was here at the end of my first year talking about the ag pathway. This past year we had the tech pathway approved. I think some of you may have sat in on we had a meeting and we invited community members and people from state ed. Mr. Bennett was part of it, and back I think in September. And we submitted all of our stuff to state ed, and so now we have another pathway. This is a technical endorsement that goes on students' diplomas. So it's just one additional thing where our students can graduate, and if they have the ag pathway or the tech pathway, it's just another thing that they can talk about when they go into the workforce or when they're doing any kind of entrance interviews for colleges. The whole idea behind the tech pathway is that in addition to the coursework that the students need to take, they also take a 3-part test at the end of the year, and this is a national test that kids across the country do take these. It's a industry test, and so what they have to do is they have to take a written portion of it, they have to do a performance portion of it, and they also need to be part of create a local project, so something locally that they put through. State Ed has some guidelines as to like what pathways, even underneath ag or tech, or the one that I'll talk about in 1 second, FACS. So this year, when we worked on the technology, it's going to be the CTE engineering technology. So any students that are taking this will have like a couple extra courses that they take with regards to engineering, and that will help our students if they choose to apply to a college or go straight into the workforce. We are also starting the approval process for FACS. In that, we're in the beginning phases of it, so I'm sure Ms. Peklak and Matt will be working really hard on that next year as well too. And then the final bullet that I'm going to talk about is our utilization of data. So we have been using Intervention Compass at the elementary school for quite a while. I think last year was the first year that it was used at the middle school and at the high school. At the secondary level, we use it a majority of it into our RTI process and our RTI meetings. It's basically kind of like a one-stop shop where we can collect all the data and have it in one central location. For students, it's also a place where we can write down what interventions we've tried already and if there's any success or lack thereof through the interventions, so we don't try this again or keep continuing on with those interventions. Something that I was very excited about this year is that we started doing a standard data protocol. And so at the middle school and high school, I know at the superintendent's conference day in November, Todd presented on, what does the data protocol look like, all the different steps. Our departments were able to, our teams in the departments were able to do a deeper dive into the multiple sets of data that we already have, and this is going to help us in future ways, like where are some patterns, what are we lacking, what are we doing really good at, and this all helps us inform instruction.
Just to put a little closure to our curriculum highlights here, our professional learning. A lot of professional learning did occur over this past school year, but 2 key areas definitely were supporting our teachers who would be teaching the really great reading program. So again, providing them the professional training so they could utilize that with our students in the classrooms. And then all of our faculty, K-12, it was broken into K-5, then more 6-12, were able to experience working with an outside consultant from Cognitive Connections, Sarah Ward, on executive functioning and skills the students need to have and how strategies to help kids who may not have them, in terms of just controlling behaviors in the classroom, things like that. So it was very well received. We're looking to try to see if we can have her continue with some of her work from this past year for this upcoming school year.
Thanks, Brian. I want to move forward and take a look at some numbers. Some data which we have used to measure the success of our curriculum work. And so to begin with, looking at some iReady data, and really what we're looking at here is a 30,000-foot view. It's a flyover, if you will. And as you all know, we've been learning together over the past couple of years, that we use iReady as a screening tool for our intervention program. So it's the first part of our learning process. It provides data that tells us where a student is at a moment in time in relation to their grade level and to national norms. In addition to that, it allows us to monitor student growth throughout a school year and then longitudinally over longer periods of time. We give the iReady test 3 times a year in math and in reading. So what you have here is the 5-level breakdown, right? Mid-on grade or above, early on grade, 1 grade below, 2 grades below, or 3 or more grades below. So this is a breakdown of the percentage of our students and where they place on that 5-level scale. There are other schools, or not schools rather, but there's other data represented here. The bar all the way to the right is Greenville Central School District on our spring assessment. Moving toward the left, we have New York State, spring 22-23. Moving further to the left, that's the national spring of 22-23, and then all the way to the left, there to provide context, is national in the spring of 18-19. I'll let you take a look for a second.
Matt, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Looking at the Greenville data,
Yes.
this is for the past year. Do you recall offhand how that distribution compares to prior years?
Offhand, I don't want to speak to numbers, but I do have them, and I can provide that in a follow-up.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. In me taking a look at this, what I notice is 4 points below state when we're looking at students who are mid, on grade or above, and 8 points below national level. When we're looking at students, when I combine both of the greens, so mid on grade and early on grade, we're 3 points below the state and 7 below national. And then looking down at the bottom there are students who are struggling the most. We are in line with national and state when we look at the percentage of our students who are 2 grades below or 3 or more grade levels below. Thoughts or wonderings, noticings?
Just to understand how to interpret this. So this might not be the best way to put it, but what would a significant difference be? In other words, if we're, say, 2 or 3 points below the state numbers, I don't know if that's really material, but 7 or 8 seems like it would be.
I think I agree with you there, right? When we're within 5 percentage points, and especially when we're talking Greenville, we tested a total of 600. I think we were able to establish that, nationally we're talking hundreds of thousands of students, and across the state we're talking tens of thousands of students that take this exam. When we're looking at Greenville, that translates into a few percentage points. Really isn't that many students. So I think when we start looking at something getting greater than 5%, I think that's something we take notice of. Yes, Kelly.
So this data is based on everyone who's taken iReady. This is overall, right?
That's right. Grades 2 through 8.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, Matt, there are no opt-outs for iReady.
There's no official opt-out for iReady. We have some students who may have been absent for an entire administration,
Right.
Those sort of instances. But to my best of my recollection, there is no official, the student is opting out of the iReady administration.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. And just to clarify, Kelly, in the springtime, the first grade takes it too. So for the springtime, it's 1st through 8th. But when we take them here in the fall, it'll be 2nd through 8th.
Matt, one quick question.
Yeah.
8th grade accelerated students, do they take it or they do not?
They do take it,
They do,
and
okay.
one of the things that we noticed this year with those 8th grade accelerated students, they were taking the iReady at the time that they were getting ready to take their Regents. They're getting ready to take their Earth Science. They're getting so this was one other thing that was on their plate, and they actually communicated that, like, hey, we're really super busy right now. Yeah.
Well, and with that too, we don't have the students take the 8th grade math state assessment or science
Right.
if they're in the accelerated courses like Earth Science or algebra. So,
We try to balance it, but this is one more thing for them at that time of the year. Yes.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Do we feel encouraged or discouraged that the yellow seems to be growing?
So when looking at a single data point like iReady, I try not to get too high or too low, right? Things are never as good as they seem, or they're never as bad as they seem. When you look at one data point, you can think, hey, that's not bad. You can look at another data point, and you could reach for the Pepto-Bismol, right? So I don't know if we ever look at our numbers and say, well, that's encouraging or that's discouraging. I think what we try to do is look at our numbers and say, what is this telling us that we need to do next? right? And while it's hard to not get discouraged when the numbers are not good, because we get invested in these, right? We set targets related to them. I think we try to keep as level ahead as possible to try to make it so we can plan clearly going forward, and to not get too caught up in, is this positive or is this negative? Because in truth, there is always going to be some positive and there is always going to be some negative, right? So the idea of just trying to understand where we are currently at and what is this data telling us that we need to prioritize.
Matt, did you want to say something, Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to say too, like, you know, Christy just mentioned a few minutes ago about the intervention compass and how it's a stop place for like all our information. What we're able to do at times is actually, you know, if you have a student who's scoring low on iReady, you can also then compare how they're doing in, you know, ELA for the quarter grades too, and you can have that next to each other and see, and then you can have a discussion with the team and the teacher and say, you know, is this student really demonstrating this type of score on here or not? So it is a data point, and that's why we try to look at a lot of things, and that's what intervention compass is great about, because it's kind of putting it all in one place just to kind of compare across. Here's their iReady and ELA and math, here's their quarter grades. And it gives us a bit in attendance and things like that, so it gives us a bigger picture of what is truly happening with that student.
That sort of ties into my question, because I was wondering, is there a correlation or what is the relationship with absenteeism for each of the categories? I'm just curious, as I was looking at it, yes, I would expect it to be correlated, but I'm curious as to how closely. Just food for thought.
I think that's a really good question, and I think that connects back to some of the discussion we had around summer school students, and are the schools who are students who are qualifying for summer school, are they also our chronically absent students?
So we could theoretically in the fall then see the summer school students and kind of see, comparing the iReady, okay, what has happened longitudinally. Fascinating.
Any other thoughts, questions on this slide? Move on to the next one here. We're kind of zooming in a little bit further here, coming down from that 30,000-foot view, and we're looking at movement within a school year. And here you get the scores broken down from where we were in September of 22 and then where we were in June of 23. And here you can see Greenville Middle School and Ellis Elementary School. This is what iReady calls their 3-level placement report. So they combine the early on grade level and the mid on grade level into one green, right? So at the beginning of the school year, on Diagnostic 1, the first test, the middle school was 31% on grade level, green. The end of the school year, 35. For Ellis, beginning of the school year, 35, end of the school year at 54. And you can also see the variation in the numbers when we get down to the 2 or more grade levels below. So this reflects the movement across the school year. The triangles there are a visualization. What you want to see is that red triangle at the top shrink and the green at the bottom grow over the course of the year.
I have one question. Do you find maybe in the middle school, because of the other testing at the end, like you had mentioned, that maybe they're not putting as much in, it seems like we're growing at the end of the year in the elementary school, but we're only going up 4%. In the middle school comparative, you think maybe it's just they're not taking it as serious because of all the other exams that's going on?
So iReady calls that an engagement issue, right? So when we meet with them and we go over their data, or our data, they call it an engagement issue, and really getting off into the weeds and looking at some longitudinal data and kind of looking at, you know, median percent scores for individual students, there were some things in the middle school data that our rep had said, well, you know, this looks like it could be a little bit of a flag to me, the variation that we're seeing, the jump. So she said it suggested that there's possibly an engagement issue at the middle school levels, and that we might want to look at our, you know, our scheduling. We might want to look at how we're communicating with the students about the importance of the exam, taking into account how long they're working at once on it, and those sort of things, because it was something that was noted from iReady.
Okay, good, thank you.
So it looks like from this, I mean, you're seeing positive improvement, which is, I think, good, right? You're seeing the red shrink, the green grow.
Yeah, within the school year,
Right.
That's what we want to see.
Right.
Yeah.
And at least qualitatively, is it possible to draw any, is it too soon to draw any conclusions about how much that might be attributed to really great reading versus coaches versus something else?
Actually, when we're going to go a few slides here, and I think we'll be able to drill down a little bit into that question,
Okay.
particularly with the really great reading and the phonics work. Yeah. So, as we've continued to grow with iReady and learn more and more about the system and about the data, I've learned that they really stress looking at not only proficiency, which is what we were just looking at, right? Percentage of students that are on grade level or percentage of students that are below grade level. But they also recommend looking at growth data as a performance measure and kind of taking those two pieces together. So tonight, I decided to share something new with you. This is a graph showing annual student growth. It's the progress towards annual typical growth. iReady makes a scale. And what they do is, at the beginning of the school year, student A takes their iReady test. Nationally, iReady takes all of those students who scored kind of near where student A scored, and they put them all into one bucket. And they say, if you make typical growth, you will score here, right? And then, so over the course of the year, from the first test to the second test to the third test, what you want to see is a growth score of 100, all right? That means you have made typical growth for the year. When you start exceeding that 100 score, you start moving towards more of what they call stretch growth. That means you're kind of closing the gap, right? So the way that they present that data to us is by using the median percent progress. So what we're looking at here is the Ellis Elementary School reading, the middle student, and if we lined up all of our students in a row, what was that middle student's percent progress? And so in 22-23 at Ellis, the median percent progress was 108%. So slightly exceeding the target. Last year it was 109. The year before it was 153%. So that would be significantly exceeding the growth target. You know, mid-year the target is 50%. Any questions or thoughts on this? This new information.
How does it look by grade? Are you seeing big differences by grade?
Yeah, there are swings by grade when you look down into it, and you drill down. We can look here into our middle school, and here we see kind of it's a big drop off from where we've been the last 2 years. Again, the target being 100%, the median percent progress for our middle schoolers overall was 86%. So below that target of 100. But the last 2 years, it was at 130 and 139. So something definitely different this year with the iReady reading data for math in the middle school, or excuse me, the iReady reading data in the middle school.
Do you have any idea what's driving that?
I think part of the question is to look at that engagement piece, but then looking more closely and drilling down into the data, there's a particular cohort of students that iReady had said, you know, these are scoring within the reliability range that we like to see, and this particular group of students that we've identified look to be struggling more, right? So there are, you know, in drilling down into the data, we can identify that cohort of students and be proactive through our intervention and through our tier 1 curriculum that we are going to do for those students, and being aware that they're coming in as a cohort that's, you know, the data is showing not great progress, and that's one of the reasons why we do things like this, because it helps us understand, you know, this group of students moving into this grade level, and this group of students within that grade level need more support. Other thoughts or wonderings on that?
Hold on a minute.
Yeah, Dave.
Before you go too far,
Yeah.
I just have a wonder about the term typical growth. How does iReady describe that or determine it, more importantly?
So their definition is based on how test takers nationwide score in the same grade at the same starting level of performance. So with all their research and all their number crunching, they've been able to determine, you know, if a second grader scores this at the beginning of the school year, if they're going to make 1 year's growth over that time, this would be their target at the end of the school year. How they get to those numbers is more advanced than the level which I go to with it. But it's a predetermined measure that iReady has come up with through their data analysis.
One other question for you. I'm glad you gave this growth to us, because what I'm wondering is, and you answered Tracy's question with her question about grade levels, individual grades, and you had mentioned that, you know, there was problems that could have been identified where it was different. I don't think you've done this, but if I was in your position, I would correlate that with where the kids are when COVID was at its worst. Not the particular problem of COVID, but the educational secondary effect that it had on these kids. And I'm wondering if, like, what I'm looking at is, you know, the 8th graders were fourth graders, you know, 1920, and then if you look at their growth when you get a chance, and the 7th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade, whether or not that is something that we could look at and say, okay, not that I'm looking for a reason, but I'm looking for an effect, you know what I mean?
So I hear that the thought is you're wondering if we can look at specific cohorts, look back at that time when things really got shut down and things really got disrupted.
And how does it filter through with growth? Now, you know, the other chart you had, the iReady chart, you know, that's a point in time, right? But growth is not.
Right. More of a longitudinal thing.
Right.
And Matt, I was waiting to ask a question, but it's, I think, related to what Dave was just asking, so I'm going to jump in. Okay. Hopefully I don't derail anything. But it's that same question. I mean, if you look at, just pick any grade, hypothetically 3rd grade reading, year to year, the number can go up or down, but that's, you know, as different cohorts are moving through, the number will change regardless of what how effective teaching is, just by virtue of different students. And that information, I think, is interesting, but also interesting seems to be following the cohort year to year and seeing how they improve, and hopefully seeing that improvement more and more to the green and whatever. And I don't remember how, or if we have a good way to like track that and present it at meetings like this.
I believe in your data profiles, if I'm not wrong, there are graphs in there which show the cohorts over time. So it'll show you when they were in second grade, then when they were in third grade, when they were in fourth grade.
So I need to go back and look.
Yeah, I do believe they're in there if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Jay, to go back to your question on, have we seen, have we been able to pinpoint what the effects are on the, any improvement that there's been? Well, we were very curious about that because of the amount of work that we've put into really great reading and phonics instruction, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Ellis had set some pretty dynamic goals this year based specifically on phonics proficiency as measured by iReady. So the table that we have here it's iReady for grades 1 through 5, and then some ESGI kind of early phonics skills that we tested. So all the way over on the left, you see a column that says K ESGI, and then goes on grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. And so this is the phonics proficiency, the percentage of students who are measured as proficient in phonics. So the column there for June 21, and if you move across to June 22, and you'll see what the target that Ellis set for June 23 was, and that final target, that final column there that has the color coding in it, that's the final of where we ended up. So those students in grades 3, 4, 5, where we piloted really great reading as a Tier 1 instructional piece, really those teachers embraced that because they noticed deficits because there hadn't been a real dynamic phonics program. You'll see those final scores there a lot higher than the June 21 scores, and you'll see that in most cases we exceeded the target. So I think this work right here is connected, or this data right here is connected to the really great reading. And I also, I feel that it's connected to the work that the coaches are doing, because the coaches have really spearheaded bringing that research into practice in the classrooms. So any thoughts or questions on that? Noticings or wonderings? All right. So we'll shift over to math, and it's going to be the same data views for math as we had for ELA. Let you all take a look. A quick takeaway from my eyes looking at this. So mid-on grade or above, Greenville is 3 points below New York State, 6 points below national. Combining both greens, so mid-on grade and early-on grade, we were slightly above the state and slightly above national. And looking down to 2 grades below or 3 or more grades below, we're below the state and below the national, but on the good side of being below that, because these are the students who are furthest behind. Does anybody else have any noticings or wonderings?
I think one of the things that's interesting is compared to the historical. So we use the historical as pre-COVID as just kind of a reference point, and just schools everywhere, not just in Greenville, but schools everywhere still had, there's work to be done.
Yeah. Okay. Zooming in again, mathematics, this is our 3-tier model. Again, looking at movement within the school year, broken down. You know, you've got your triangle there, where we were in September of 2022, and then where we ended up in June 2023. So you see the change in the size of the red at the top, the change in the size of the green at the bottom. And then looking below, breakout into the middle school and to Ellis.
Matt, do we have in looking at the triangle, a hypothetical, or like, what would we like to see each size triangle be? Is there you'll never, I understand tier 3 will never be eliminated, but over time, you know, using norm referenced elements, what should it be at?
So not to speak directly to iReady, because that was some of the data that I was trying to get from them. But generally speaking, an intervention triangle, you want to have about 80% of your students at tier 1. And then tier 2, you're in a range of 10 to 15. And then tier 3, you're in a range of 5 or so. That is kind of a standard RTI triangle.
That helps.
We'll actually talk about that a little bit later this evening when we get into our behavior, how we're progress monitoring for that. Moving forward, looking at the typical growth. Our typical growth in mathematics isn't as dynamic, which is interesting because our proficiency levels are a little bit higher. But I think that's why it's important that we are looking at proficiency levels and growth. So this year for Ellis, our middle student, the middle students' percent progress was 86%. In the past, it's been as high as 115. Last year we were at 96. And at the middle school, we, again, were a little below. 89% was the percent progress for the median student. But years past, we've been above that target. We've hit 115, we've hit 139 again. So definitely different data in terms of percent proficient and growth from math in the middle school this year.
Here's an esoteric question. Did we have a lot of snow days this past year? I don't remember. No?
I'd
Okay.
have to check our social media
I'm
and look at some
curious.
videos.
I believe we use them all.
We used them all.
Well,
Okay. Now, there would be an interesting correlation to see, all right, Eric, keep going, Matt.
Thank you, Eric. There's no correlation. Definitely no causation.
Moving forward, I wanted to take a look at ESGI math. This is just a quick shot that we have given you the past 2 years. And this is looking at 2 skill tests that we do in kindergarten. And this is looking at, it's not like students proficient. The way that ESGI gives it to us is percent of correct responses, right? So this is a tool that we use for identifying students for intervention. The teachers use this as a diagnostic tool to know what students do know and what they don't, and to form groups. But it also is just a number that we can use to gauge how that particular cohort is doing. So the 94% on number identification, that's pretty typical of what we've had looking back at the data the last few years. We score right around 95%. On the oral counting, this year it was 64% correct with 34% incorrect. That's a little bit higher than last year. Last year it was 58 versus 42 in terms of correct responses versus incorrect responses in the oral counting piece. And that's up to 100.
Matt?
Yes.
Question on that? What's, is average for a kindergartner? I mean, do you think this is normal, below what you expect, above what you expect?
One of the ways that I was trying to learn for myself, what do we typically get over periods of time, was to look back at our historical scores and to know that this, what we had last year is slightly higher than what we had the year before. To know that the number identification is, where we typically, when kids are ending kindergarten, they're able to do that, and they're pretty proficient in it. ESGI isn't a normed test, so there's no way for us to look at and say, hey, across New York State or nationally, exiting kindergarten, 75% of students can do this. One of the reasons we test for it is because it's a standard that we hold ourselves to, and it's a standard that we expect to be able to meet. That we would like it to be 100% of responses correct for counting 0 to 100. But if you think about it, if one student counts all the way to 100 and the other student counts to 35, then percent correct responses, there's a big gap there. So I think that to really look at this, to really look at it at a student by student basis, who are our students who can count 0 to 100 no problem? Who are our students who can count 0 to 20 before they fall off? Who are our students who get to 50? Who are our students who get to 70, but then they repeat 70 after 79? What level of error are they making when they do that? Is it an error from fatigue? Is it an error from a misconception of knowledge? That's the kind of granular level work that the teachers do with ESGI, particularly our math interventionists, and the work that our math coach does with our teachers. Speaking of our math coach, here are our math fact fluency rates from Reflex Math. I believe this is the 3rd year that we're using Reflex Math, and each year we have seen fluency rates improve. So the graph on the left, the blue is the start of the year, and the red is the end of the year. And the table on the right, I inserted in there because I was curious myself. Oh, okay, well, what did 2nd grade look like at the end of last year? What did 3rd grade look like at the end of last year? And by and large, we've seen the trend for math fact fluency as measured by Reflex to be heading in the positive direction.
Sorry about that. So taking a look quickly at the middle school, and Mr. Gorgon will do the high school here in a second, about the total course failures. So one of the things to keep in mind with a lot of our course failures on here is that it is, there can be at times here multiple courses failed by a single student. This accounts for all our courses, whether it's PE or Ag, and some of these classes are 10-week classes that can be factored into this. But with that, discussions are occurring throughout the year at the 5-week progress report, then the end of the 1st quarter, then there's interim at the middle of quarter 2, and so on, with the teams, with parent-guardian conferences, and our RTI meetings, as we're constantly throughout a year trying to figure out, why is the student failing a course at the end of the 1st quarter, at the end of the 3rd quarter, and what support may they need to move forward. We may find some students struggling at the beginning of the year, and at 2nd quarter may decide they might need a tier 2 intervention, put them in a lab to get some extra support in either math or ELA. So again, this is a data point that we pulled together with other pieces. We may tie in, maybe the student was absent a lot in the 2nd quarter. So there's a lot of pieces that are discussed at our team meetings, our RTI meetings, to determine, what is happening with a student. And typically, from quarter to quarter, it will vary with students who might be, failing class 2. And we talked a little bit before about engagement at the middle school level. Sometimes we may find that, a student has a down quarter and then brings it back up. So there's a lot of factors that do play into play here.
Okay, so here we have exactly kind of what Brian had shared, but for the high school, you have your 4 quarters, the last 4 years as well too. I'm actually really proud of these numbers. They're still a little too high, but I want to say that I'm really proud of the work that our teachers are doing. I think this speaks very loudly for all the hard work that they put into making sure that students are being successful. These are our teachers that are encouraging students to stay after school. These are the students that we're talking about at RTI meetings. We're putting interventions in place, and we're following up at future RTI meetings to discuss, is this intervention beneficial to these students? And I think another thing that we've been doing this year that is really helping with these numbers to look as good as they have over the past 4 years is that we're really involving the parents in this, and getting the parents on board, especially for high school students, is very important, because I think there are quite a few parents out there that just let their children be independent. And this is still proving they are still kids, they still need guidance, and they're not that independent just yet. So, like I said, we still have some work to do, but I'm very proud of the numbers that are up here.
Okay, we're going to move into goal 2. These are the culture highlights. So just to highlight some things that we've done culturally. So when I speak of culturally, I speak of organizational culture, right? Things that happen with teachers, students, and administration, as well as some things that just happen with a focus on students, student behavior, student attendance. In particular, our goal last year was to work on our environment, to make a more positive environment that would contribute to higher student attendance. So some of that work that we did was the work on maximizing team and department time for our teachers, and that was for planning. That was for curriculum planning, for mapping, that was for planning for individual student needs, looking at data, all those things that we did, the collaboration, teachers not working in a silo, working as a team. We've got a lot of really talented people here, and you put them in a room and some really dynamic things can happen. We also worked on Aperture, social emotional learning. We did social emotional learning screeners for our elementary schoolers, our middle schoolers, and our high schoolers. That was the first time through that. It taught us something about our students, particularly in the high school and the middle school, when those students were actually self-rating themselves, how they felt. You really have to take that information when you get it and really take note of it, because that's the kids telling you right there what kind of place they're in. In addition to that, another real positive culture thing that happened was the continuation of the Character Ed K through 5 assemblies. Mr. Mahan and the staff down at Ellis have done a really wonderful job with that over time. That's a consistent thing that's happened. But we were really proud this year to bring back the Spartan Strong assemblies at the high school. And we weren't sure how the kids were going to respond to it because most of them had never been to an assembly because of COVID. But we had a really good time on that day. We were able to debut our new mascot. It was a lot of fun. And to see the smiles on the kids' faces and to have grade levels chanting and cheering, it was a really, really positive event. And those are the things that'll stick out for, hopefully for them over time, those things that you remember about school.
In the middle school, we continue to keep moving forward our PBIS program, our positive behavior intervention supports. This year we had some great celebrations, one in September, one at the end of the school year. I think some of the pictures from the September one are on the website up until just recently, of some kids just having a great time, as we really also, though, reinforced the idea of the expectations that we were asking students in the building on a daily basis. And we also continue to reflect every year. We've been doing PBS for about 4.5 years now. We reflect each year. We listen to feedback from some of our staff and faculty and from students. And this past year we adjusted things in terms of student recognition by creating a PBIS store, and our Greenville Green numbers actually kind of doubled this year. I think more students felt connected with our program, which is a positive thing. And actually some of that Greenville Green data I think is in the middle school profile that's in your packet you can check out also. Also this past year was with the culture highlights, kind of goal 2 was a focus on chronic absenteeism. That was a big part of the 22-23 goals. And we had absentee surveys that we used with students, and students were very honest with them. We've got some great data from them that were then discussed in RTI meetings. Once the aperture screenings were done also, you could make some correlation of students that how they were from chronic absenteeism who were kind of flagged a little bit on the aperture screener. So I think it is something, a tool that we're going to continue to keep using as we take a look at this past year, students with chronic absenteeism issues going into this school year to see what interventions did we start and what can we continue with some students as we move forward into this next school year. Because we did see some turnaround in some students, and some students we have to keep trying to take a look at and figure out how we can support them. Jay, question?
Thanks, Brian. Can you elaborate on what you learned from the surveys?
We were able to kind of, with some of the questions that were asked, figure out why, was the kid just absent for what reasons? So it really gave us reasons for kids of whether they were connected to school, whether they were home watching siblings. I mean, those are just some different examples of what we were hearing from kids. So, they didn't feel a part of school. Okay, so we kind of structured some of the things, interventions we were trying with students in different ways, because it allowed us to dig a little bit deeper with some students who were, again, like I said, pretty honest with answers to some of the questions.
I missed if you said, were the surveys anonymous, or could you relate survey answers to actual individual attendance levels?
We actually did the surveys one-on-one with the students.
Oh.
We sat down, an adult, it was conversational. We went down through the survey questions and, hey, tell me about this. And, they would rate it or give an anecdotal answer at times. We had a place to record those things as well. We learned quite a bit from the students who we surveyed. One of the things that we learned was they felt that their teachers believed in them, and it was encouraging for us to find out that the reasons they weren't coming to school wasn't because they didn't like being here, right? There were other things that were impacting them. By and large, our students who are sitting down and surveying with us.
I just want to say, I think it's important that you give them the opportunity, because a lot of kids, when they are struggling, they want an adult to ask. They want someone to call them out a little bit so they can have that freedom to express what is wrong. So I just think that's really nice.
And another focus that we did, Mr. Reed's been doing this at the middle school for the past year or two, I believe, DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he got such great feedback from his faculty that participated in the professional development training on this. We decided to do it at the high school level as well too. So it's really exciting that we're a year behind what the middle school has done, but now there's a common language in 6 through 12 based around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And not only did the faculty really take to it, it was something that we really needed. And sometimes you don't really know what you need until you have a training, and then you hear the faculty feedback afterwards, and it's a very positive thing. So that's a plus.
Thanks, Kristen. All right, so those are the cultural highlights. We move you into some of that data on the next slide here. Again, we mentioned, the focus of our cultural work was to try and make sure that this is an environment that students wanted to be in. And our target was to impact chronic absenteeism. Again, chronic absenteeism is defined as missing 10% or more of school days, so regardless of whether or not it was an excused or unexcused absence, that doesn't matter. So what we saw this year was a return to levels similar to what we've historically experienced in the middle school and the high school. Ellis levels are still elevated past COVID time, or pre-COVID times, down significantly from where we were last year, but still high, and that's still of note. If we go on and look past chronic absenteeism data and look at the actual daily attendance by building, so what you're seeing here is going back to the end of the school year, June 2018, 2019, 2021, 2022, and then 2023, you'll see the daily average attendance by building for the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school. So again, we're seeing that the numbers have returned closer to where they were in the 2018-2019 school year, in June of 2018, June of 2019. And that's actually despite the attendance that we had in November, December this year. That was some of the worst attendance that we had had in like 10 years. We had a lot of students sick in November and December, and the numbers really rebounded once we got past that period of time. I was making attendance calls at that time of the year, and my kids were homesick, and people's kids were homesick with the same thing that mine were homesick with, and they were homesick with a lot of things that teachers were homesick with. It was a very busy time of the year for attendance. Yeah, go.
I know there was a lot of chatter even on like some of the parent pages and stuff about, oh, should I keep my kid home? Would you send your kid with this? Coming out of where we've been, I know that we kind of changed and said, oh, keep it all home. Is there any thought or discussion about kind of maybe going back and kind of re-educating parents on things, or are you just kind of letting parents decide for themselves, looking at these rates? You know, I mean, do we keep the kids home for everything, or do we start kind of going back to where we were?
I think that's a really good question in terms, and these are questions that we've actually started having is, you know, how do we communicate about attendance kind of in a tier 1 piece? Like, what's that message we're sending across to folks? And, you know, trying to strike that balance between, we need you here. Number one, we want you here, we value you here. When your kids are in school, they're part of a community, and having everybody there makes it easier for the teacher to teach, right? Because you don't have to stop and go back and reteach. But also understanding that people get sick. It happens, and there are times of the year where more people get sick than others, and some people have really large families, and you can't spread apart in your house, and those families are going to have more students who get sick. But I think that, to your point, to your question, that's a really good question for us to be asking ourselves is, how do we communicate tier 1 out? What's our attendance message to our community? And how do we strike that balance between, hey, a reminder, we are held accountable for this, right, by state and federal standards. At the same time, we understand that, you know, absences are going to happen. Please communicate with us when your child is out so we can make sure that they're safe, so we can plan around how long they're going to be out and be ready for when they're back.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
You'll have to educate me a little bit here. Your last 2 slides, if we just take your goal 2 slide,
Yes.
if we look at June 22-23, 22.6, does that mean that 22% of the student population in that building is missed more than 10 days?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
So your next slide, I don't see how the other 90% of the kids must be here constantly.
a good question. So, almost 1 out of every 4 kids was absent for 18 days or more, right? 10% of the school year. There's other students who balance that out, right? We're talking, 78% of the students had less than those. And some of those students have far less. But what the daily average attendance rate is what was the attendance, what that's taking is what was the attendance rate in that building daily and average throughout the entire school year. So at the end of the 2023 school year, the average daily attendance at Ellis was 93%. At the middle school, it was 94%. At the high school, it was 90%. So thinking about it that way, on the average day, about 7% of the students were absent at Ellis, about 6% were absent at the middle school, and about 10% were absent at the high school. So I don't know if that does anything to help break that down.
If you have a day in December, though, you might find that
Oh,
only
yeah.
6% of
Yeah.
kids
I get
were
that.
here that day. So it's just,
We had days in November, December where we were around 70% of the kids here.
Speaking specifically for the high school, I can tell you that 10% in June of 2023 and the same percent in 22 is my seniors.
Well then, because again, I'm trying to tie this all together with the performance of the kids. When you have these conversations with them on their survey, and you get around to attendance with them, I'm wondering what their, and I'm sure the responses from seniors are going to be a lot different than 4th graders, but I'm wondering, do they give you excuses, legitimate excuses of why they're not here, or is it a comfort issue? Do they understand that they need to be here to learn, that it's their education, not anybody else's?
Yeah, on the survey, we only surveyed middle schoolers and high schoolers.
Okay.
One of the questions we asked them is, you know how many days you were out last year? That was always really interesting because there was a gap between what their perception was and what the actual number was. And a couple of the students, I was like, okay, you were out this number of days. And they're like, whoa, I knew it was out loud. I didn't know it was out that many days. So that was interesting. And the idea about them knowing they have to attend, I felt like they did when you were sitting down talking with them. And the honesty and the reasons why, a lot of kids would say, on this day, I was, just going back a couple of weeks here, I can tell you I was sick on this day and sick on that day. One middle school girl started giving me, I got sick on the trampoline, and she was giving me examples of where she got sick around her property. And then some will tell you, I have to stay home when a sibling is sick. And then some of them told us it's anxiety, right? Sometimes it's just too much for me to go to school. And that is our largest challenge.
Matt, just to follow up on that, do you have any way, do you currently, or do you have any way to track anxiety levels? I mean, I know it's a big issue generally for students, but do you know to what extent it's increasing in districts?
So,
How prevalent it is?
well, the aperture is not designed to pinpoint that specific piece of information. It can give us an idea about kind of an overall social emotional health level, the state of their social emotional well-being. We don't have a consistent metric to be able to say, morning check-in, what's your anxiety level for our student body. I know we have certain counselors who do those activities with individualized students as part of an intervention plan. And those are students who have been identified by teachers or by the students or by their parents as needing that level of support. But that's an intervention that we do too.
So, just qualitatively or subjectively, do you have a sense of how many students are really affected by anxiety and how that's changing over time?
My impression of it is that we're dealing with a lot of that. And I feel like we're dealing with more of it than we were dealing with 10 years ago. I don't know if anybody, would anybody like to add to that?
I couldn't name the articles for you, but almost every third or fifth article that pops up on Newsweek or any of the other educational websites that I look at, there's always something about increased levels of anxiety among students nationwide. And so I think just something that schools are needing to be more aware of, and I think that's why we're doing more with SEL. We're really trying to focus on having more welcoming environments. So, but I don't foresee it going down either. I think it's just, unfortunately, I don't want to say it's the way of the world, but I think there's just so many different things out there that kids are being asked to do, and I'm not necessarily talking about school, like an outside life, or the pressures that they're feeling or that they put on themselves. Yeah, social, emotional, like social life, social media. I mean, there's a lot of studies coming out about how social media affects students' lives. So I think it's something that, as a nation, we're going to figure out how to deal with.
One of the things I think, though, with us starting with the aperture screening for SEL last year is we've started a baseline that we're going to be able to hopefully, as we go again this year, we'll be able to look back at our list of kids that kind of were flagged on that SEL screener last year and compare and see have some things improved or not. Is our list getting longer? So we are this year will be interesting again to see and compare last year's screeners. So.
All really good questions. Else? Okay, I'll turn this over to the building principals to talk about referrals.
So one of the things I think if you look at the middle school discipline referrals here, I think it's kind of important to take a look at the 2018-19 school year, and then maybe move forward to 21-22. I mean, the end of the 19-20 school year was we were out of school with COVID, so there really from March on was no discipline referrals, and then that next year really was every other day students. So half the students were in. So, but one of the things is we did start implementing PBIS back in 2019, middle of the 2018-19 school year. We've continued to use one part of PBIS as a minor infraction log, and it's really teachers kind of taking ownership of some of the behaviors they're seeing within their classroom, and that they're more minor rather than consistently always going to the principal. And things like, kid comes late to class, okay, teacher having that one-on-one conversation, trying to figure out why is Johnny late to my class every day? What can I do to help you? And they're usually able to resolve a lot of things within their own classroom, or whether it's reaching out to a parent. So each team kind of keeps track of those type of their own infractions to see how they can deal with students within the classroom. And we've really found that to become more effective, and it's giving teachers more, empowering them more within the classroom, rather than looking at everything, disruption as a discipline referral. So this past school year, we were up a little bit from the previous school year. Behind every behavior is always an underlying problem, so we're always trying to figure out why is the student behaving the way they are. I mean, we've really started bringing more behavior discussions into our RTI conversations or with our teams. We've actually, in the intervention compass, started doing some behavior plans in there, and that is something that we will continue moving forward this year, of looking at where some of our students were that are still in the middle school this year and where they ended the year, and what are some interventions we possibly need to put in place to start the year. And the thing to keep in mind too is when you break down those 259 referrals, majority of those referrals are from about a dozen students or so sometimes, so they're creating most of those referrals. So, there's a lot of parent communication, a lot of team meetings, a lot of trying to figure out, again, what we can do to help improve behavior of those students.
Brian, just a quick question. So for example, let's say the middle school end of year 22-23, so 259. That's the number of referrals. That does not represent the number of students with those referrals.
Correct.
Okay.
So reality is,
Good high
there was
fives.
231 students last year, 77% of the students did not have a discipline referral. So, yeah, that's usually what Kelly has.
So when you say that the teachers are handling some of that, is that counted in there? Or is that how many
Nope.
went to you?
That's how many went to me. Yes. Yes, sir.
So, for me, the question is, the 259 then, because teachers are handling some of it, the numbers might be more the 361, 419 numbers, just that the teachers have taken some of the demographic away?
Yeah, and that was the whole basis behind PBAS. The research behind that is really teachers, they're handling a lot of these minor infractions. And reality is, most of the time, with many of those students, when a teacher kind of one-on-one interacts with them, they resolve the issue. So really, it's trying to figure out that solution with the students, and not always though. And that's where you get into some of these other discipline referrals. And you also have to remember, of those 259 referrals, they're not all from the classroom. You have hallway interactions, lunchroom, recess, the bus. Those are 4 key areas where there's a lot of behavioral issues too, not necessarily in the classroom. So those aren't strictly just classroom.
I have to say, just from talking to students and seeing their feedback on some of the surveys, they actually want more discipline. So I think it's good to empower the teachers, but I also kind of like seeing the numbers going up a little bit in a weird way.
Okay. Yeah.
Crack the whip.
Well, but again, I think it's important to realize though, like when you really break things down, the majority of our students are behaving well. I mean, you're talking, so it's, a big percentage of our kids are. So it's dealing with some of those, and again, what's the underlying problem with some of these other students? Is it an academic struggle in the classroom that we have to figure out with them in terms of why they're misbehaving? So that's the kind of the crux of it. It's like, not just let's have discipline referral, but why is this referral occurring, and how do we move forward to change that behavior? So.
I didn't hear if you said, does the end of year number include the middle of year number?
Yes. Yeah, so that's, from January, at the end, we had 113 in January, we ended with 259.
Keep counting and
Yeah, it just keeps rolling forward. Thanks.
So Brian stole a little piece of my thunder. I was going to say behavior is a form of communication. I was a special ed teacher prior to becoming an administrator, and I was always trying to determine what is the function of the behavior. What is that student trying to get out of the behavior? Because a lot of it has to do with skills that they are lacking. So, just like we don't punish a kid because they can't read or because they can't do math. We teach them how to do math, right? We teach them how to do reading, and so we need to teach students the skills. Whatever it is, whatever they're lacking, how to ask for help appropriately, how to diffuse social situations appropriately. We have to teach them those skills. So with that being said, I feel like the teachers are working really hard. Like everyone in the building, the support staff, we're really trying to make students feel comfortable and welcomed when they're at school. So I feel like, in addition to what Brian had said, he's doing something a little bit different with PBIS. I challenged the teachers in the beginning of the year to focus on some of their classroom management skills, like make sure that you have structure and routine within your classroom, make sure that you're greeting students, making, the engagement piece that we talked about earlier as well too. And I think the teachers did a good job of doing so. Not only that, the teachers are guiding students in using other tools and in guiding students to other supports such as our social worker, our school psychologists, our counselors, instead of taking things upon themselves and getting into an interaction with another student or getting into an interaction with a teacher that might not be such a positive thing. They're using these other tools as well too. We will speak more a little bit about referrals in the next presentation as well too, but I do have similar numbers to what Brian had shared. So there was 359 total high school students this school year, and I had 16 students that had 5 or more referrals. So that's a little bit greater number than Brian. So those are the 16 students that we're typically talking about at RTI meetings. These are also the students that we look back at their Aperture scores and see if there's anything going on. Do they have attendance issues as well too that could be impacting some of whatever's going on throughout the school day, and therefore we see these behaviors. So it's definitely a deeper dive that we take into, and like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next presentation. Eric?
Again, the same question. As far as the final number in terms of the 447, was that number a
Final.
lower number because teachers were intervening and not sending students?
Yes. That was something I challenged. I don't have the data like Brian does. Like the teachers keep a chart of like minor infractions, but
Right.
you're stealing some of my thunder.
I'm sorry.
For my next presentation.
I'm just crunching.
Yeah.
And I have one question on, obviously it's total infractions, so there must be a percentage where it's individualized comparative to where it affects the workflow of a group of students or a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that we're looking at also?
These are not just classroom incidents either, though. This
Right.
could be, like Brian said, lunch, unstructured times. That's a big concern, for us. My high school students still go outside to recess. They still play a little too hard sometimes. Bus has been an issue again this year too. Skipping class. Again, you're still getting under your next presentation. But I have nothing to talk about in the next presentation.
We're trying to shorten the next one up.
All right, our third goal for the 22-23 school year was community. I think just looking at some of that quick data up there, you can see from social media that, overall, it would be hard to say communication didn't improve this past year, but we always know there's always room for improvement. We've heard a lot of different positive feedback. We've also still heard some things that people feel like we need to adjust and change. So those are things that are always going to continue to be looked at. And that's internally within our own system, within our building, K-12, but then also just externally with the community. What's our building to community communication or even district community communication there. The website was relaunched in December with some different photos. We've heard some different feedback. Most of it's been positive at this point. I know our BLT at one point, one of our goals this past year was to look at the website and things like that. We provided some feedback to Sierra at times too, so we had a wide range of perspectives on that. Just different types of communication. One of the things this past year was the Greenville Pioneer. It's put in some monthly section there, and we received some positive feedback, especially for some of the people that don't use social media. So we're still putting that out there in paper for people to look at. And again, our website is always it's an ongoing process of updating, and I think you'll see, again, coming up in our next presentation, we're continuing to look at the communication with our community and how we can improve it. So this past school year at the end of June here was our 8th year using the perception survey data that we have, that we put out and ask our students, staff, and our faculty, and our parents and guardians to complete. This is something we've looked at every year. There's a part of the survey where there's kind of just a straightforward question and people rated either a 1, strongly disagree, or 5, strongly agree. We take a look at the numbers, anything that is kind of a low 3 or below. Typically some areas are in between a 2 or 3. Those are the ones that we will really take a hard look at, and that typically has been occurring when all our BLTs come together in the summer. We take a hard look at the data, and usually some of those perception survey numbers from there we utilize within measurements for trying to improve our communication or whatever with our community. Also in the perception surveys at the end are 2 open-ended response questions, basically asking all those subgroups of people to what are the strengths of each building, what are the challenges. And this is kind of a summary up here on the slide there of what maybe had 10 or more responses to it. One of the things that was interesting, although our numbers were higher this year overall in the perception survey across the district, there still is some people who are filling out just the short kind of response ones and not completing the open-ended responses. So we have some of the numbers go a little bit lower on the open-ended responses. You can see in two of the groups with faculty and parents, and communication is both a strength and a challenge. So definitely some people saw communication improve this year, and some people definitely gave us some comments of things they felt like still need to improve, which is our things, again, that this past July we looked at and reflected upon to see what are some changes going forward.
Thoughts or questions on the perception data? Okay, so that brings us to the end of this presentation. You've all shared questions and thoughts throughout. Just wanted to revisit, give you an opportunity to ask anything in follow-up, anything in closing, any additional information that you'd like to see if I can get a hold of for you, anything along the lines of that.
I think, first of all, thank you very much. It's a lot of information, and I really appreciate it, and for letting us ask tons of questions and so forth. Some less relevant than others, I will admit. One of the questions I do have is the calendar. Would it make sense? We have had that June time frame partially driven by some deadlines that were required by New York State. Those deadlines no longer exist. And so you don't necessarily have to answer it now, but if this is a better time slot, given all of the things that you need to do in the summertime, and I'm thinking about the data analysis workshops that you did along with all the other things, then does it make sense for us to change the calendar and to move it into the August timeframe? So I leave that up to you and thoughts. There's nothing magical with that June.
I think it's worth discussing.
Okay.
All right, and I did hear you earlier when you said that there's more detail in the data that's already being presented to us here. So if I do have future questions, do I direct them to Matt, or?
You can direct them to me, CC Mike on there.
Okay.
That way he knows that we're working together on something.
Okay.
And I'll do my best to find you information or find somebody who can help explain it better than I can.
Thank you.
Not just to add in, Matt, to go along with what Jay said about a half an hour ago. On your first data graph for iReady, when he had mentioned that it would have been nice to have previous years on that bar, that I would suggest that you provide it to us, because then we can see our growth or our data change. I'd like to say thank you for putting this together. I appreciate the thoroughness of it, and I would appreciate if you would thank the teachers for working so hard. But more important than that, if you get an opportunity in a month or so, thank the kids that created this data. I'm wondering what your perception of it is, because at one time you were a K-12 principal, so you were working on this. My impression is that with all that we're going through, and I'm aware of what's going on with other schools, this data is not uncommon. And not to say anything bad, but I am pleased to see it's not getting worse. And we're going to work through the students that quite frankly, were horribly affected by what happened during 2021, 22. And I think Brian's going to see then the effects coming his way, and then Christy's going to see them shortly, or already has actually. Ninth graders are not doing as well as they could, from the other data that we've seen. So not doing as good as we could, but it's not getting worse. But I am really happy with the growth that you showed us. Because I think there's nothing more the students can do than to grow. So I thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate the feedback. Thoughts, questions, wonderings? All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate that.
All right, so now we're going to, we're doing the DCIP draft share out with the BCIP. And if you could just give us the meaning of all the different nomenclature, just for everyone that is not as familiar with all the acronyms.
Yes. So what we'll be presenting in the second presentation will be the BSIP and DSIP drafts. The BSIP is the Building Level Continuous Improvement Plan. So there's one of those for Ellis, one of those for the middle school, and one of those for the high school. And additionally, there's a District Continuous Improvement Plan, and that plan supports the work that's being done at the building levels, district level administration and work that we do at that level to support the buildings.
We could have moved it for you. That's okay.
So number 2, what we will share tonight, we'll take a look at the school improvement calendar and the process that we use to create these plans. We'll give a summary of the 2-day school improvement workshop that took place at the beginning of July. And then principals and myself will present ideas from the working drafts of these building continuous improvement plans and the district continuous improvement plans. Again, throughout, I'd like to welcome you all to ask questions, or give feedback, comments throughout, and that's fine, we welcome that. So an overview of the process, here we are in August. Buildings have gone through the improvement work, like I said, at the beginning of July, and they have begun drafting out their plans. And when I say they've begun, I say their first draft is done. They've had feedback from me. We've had follow-up building leadership team meetings where further revisions have happened. And then some teams have even had now subgroups of teachers working on further revisions of the plan to get to the point where we are. And here we are tonight presenting kind of draft ideas to you of those plans to give you an idea of what are the strategies and commitments that we want to make for the upcoming school year. So just a reminder of our continuous school improvement model here at Greenville, right? We are not a silo. We have organizations that we work with, and those organizations are very well respected, research-based organizations that help us not only with an overall improvement model, but they also bring us research-based practices for us to implement here at Greenville. And taking a look, this is a reminder of something that you've seen very often. This is our multiple measures of data, right? So we take demographic, student learning, and perception data into account when we think about how we're doing. And we look at how that data all intersects. So kind of to go back to Angela's question earlier, do you think this data is positive or negative? Well, we try to look at our data as something that guides our planning, and it helps us make adjustments with the intent of improving and meeting the needs of all students and growth year over year for everybody. We try not to be paralyzed by bad data, and we try not to be blinded by good data. We always work to understand how this information comes together to best inform us of what we need to do in order to keep improving. And I just wanted to pause for a moment so everybody could take a look at this question. This was the essential question that we kept returning to during our school improvement planning process. So what would it take to ensure that student learning increases at every grade level, in every subject area, and with every student group? There's a connection between this question and our district's mission statement, and that is intentional, right? We want all of our work to be around how do we improve for every grade level, for every subject area, and every student group. And what's our process for working on that? We're a big organization. We have hundreds of people working here. How do we get our ideas together? There's a lot of different data points flying around. Well, here's a school improvement process that we've been working with and refining over the past 2 years that Todd has brought to us with his work with Harvard University Improving Ground. We begin by identifying what are our strengths and challenges, and our data shows us that. That shows us where there's positives and where it shows us where there's negatives. Then the next step is to dig into the root causes. Why do the numbers look like this? To some of the questions that you all ask. Like Jay had asked, do you have any idea why this number might be here? During this process, we get down into that, and we have it happening with a lot of stakeholders at the table. So it's not just an administrator there trying to figure out why the 7th grade math scores are lower than they were last year. It's a team. It's a team of people that are working on doing that. Then that team of folks gets together and they brainstorm solutions. And then they look at each of those solutions and they look at what would the impact of that be as compared to the amount of effort we have to put into it. And what's the ratio there? What's the effort reward? And for those selected interventions or those selected strategies, the teams then create action plans of how they will roll those things out, how they will make them happen, and then decide how are we going to measure success? How are we going to decide if this is something that worked to address that challenge that we identified? And then throughout the year, it's about making revisions, and it's about putting things into action and communicating with folks. And so reflect and repeat year after year within the school year as well. So with all of that process, we arrive here. And these are our district goals for the 23-24 school year. So you'll see some continuity here between last year and this year. It's actually kind of a good thing that we just went over last year's end of the year goals. Because, like I said, you'll see some continuity here. So goal 1, curriculum, that goal language remains the same, right? All students will engage in relevant and challenging learning that will motivate them to be collaborative, creative, and inquisitive. So what are the things that we're going to be doing as a district to support the buildings, and what are the buildings going to be able to do to support that curriculum goal? Well, we're going to focus on continuing to build staff capacity to utilize data to inform instructional decisions. That's a research-based practice, and we know it delivers results. The next thing that we're committing to do at the district level is the implementation of the district's continuous program review process. So that's each department, that's ELA at the elementary school, math at the elementary school. It's how do we grow as a department. It's how do we refine and revise and strengthen our curriculum maps in the alignment vertically and horizontally. Those are things that happen as part of that process. Those are things that we want to continue on with Goal 1 curriculum this year. Goal 2 for culture. That goal that's set is all students, staff, and families will be provided a welcoming, safe, secure, supportive, and engaging school environment where all students thrive. Well, how are we going to support that? through the use of the RTI MTSS model. We're going to identify and support positive student behavior across all tiers of the intervention triangle. We'll talk a little bit more about what the intervention triangle is and those tiers and how we're going to support those in just a few. And last, community. Our school district wants to partner with families in the larger community to improve student learning and well-being. A lot of the work that we did last year was about how do we communicate with parents about the things we need to do that we are asking for them to do in order to be partners with us. And that's not going to change this year. And really connected to that is we have a rollout of a new student information system. And with a new student information system comes a new parent portal. So at the district level, we will be supporting parents in accessing and using the new Synergy Parent View web portal. Those are our proposed district goals for the 23-24 school year. So what we'll do here going forward is we'll look at each goal, and I'll let the building principals and myself will kind of review the strategies and the commitments that we want to make at our level to support that goal. So to begin with curriculum, I'll cover district level and some things from Ellis. I spoke a little bit about the continuous program review process already, but I also want to continue conversations about building staff capacity to utilize data. Last year, there were some things that we did in the middle school and high school that we hadn't done as an organization before, and that's a step in
On that theme of data, we have increased the way we've been using data a lot over the past few years, and we need to continue to keep building that. One of the goals we're really trying to do is have teachers working in small groups and talking about how they're utilizing data in the classroom, whether it's data from iReady and things like that, and what instructional kind of decisions or practices are they doing, and then how can they maybe share that with others. So we're trying to integrate some of our goals we're going to be working on through our team meetings, our faculty meetings, and conference days, because we know that the data it's telling us a story when we look at it all, but then what are some things that we've got to either change as adults in the classroom or interventions we need to provide for some of our students. And then, again, what are some good practices that our current teachers are using? And kind of, again, that idea of just sharing and building upon strengths of each other within our own building. And that's an important thing that came out of our BLT discussion this summer. And then also, stealing a little bit from something where the high school had gone last year, is trying to do some more of the peer-to-peer coaching. And really teachers creating a schedule and talking about good pedagogy that they're seeing in the classroom, and then carrying that back, and again, some of our faculty meetings to discuss it there, but then also looking at some research-based articles that relate to that too, and then how can we support that in our classrooms, because we need to keep looking at, not only reflecting upon how our students are doing, but also how we are doing as the adults in our building here.
I feel like it's like tag team on Christy today and make sure that everyone gets to steal her thunder. Because we are continuing doing our collaborative classroom visits. It just didn't get off and running as much as we would have liked it at the high school last year. We did a lot of background work, so towards the end of the year there was only a small handful of teachers that got in to observe other teachers, but there was some really great feedback, and the teachers were really reflective, and they were able to share out at a faculty meeting. So we're hoping that to start that off at the beginning of the school year again, and we can kind of pick up right where we started, because we started to gain some steam, but it was towards the end of the school year. The other thing that we're going to work on at the high school is engagement strategies. And what that's going to look like is there are tons of engagement strategies out there that are research-based, that are proven to work. So that is what we're going to focus on. We're going to provide professional development to teachers, obviously, so that they can feel comfortable using these engagement strategies. We're going to create a database of those activities, those strategies, and kind of like do some reflection on it. What worked, what didn't work. And also, we don't want any one or two strategies to get a little bit too stale, because there's too many teachers working on the same engagement strategies. So we're going to make sure that that we keep everything fresh and up to date in this database that we plan to or hope to create. I get to go first. So when we go on to the culture goal, some of the things that we're going to focus on at the high school level, one of the major things, so it's going back to, this will answer some of the questions, Jim and Eric, that you had. So like I stated earlier, I had 16 students that had more than 5 or more referrals throughout the school year. My freshmen were really tough. But again, when you take a look at what happened to the freshman class this year, by the end of the school year, they had 1 veteran teacher still remaining. I had 2 that went out on leave, and then another one was a brand new teacher. So it was rough for the freshman class this year. So we're really going to focus on, in regards to that as well too, so the number of referrals, when we look at what was the biggest thing that impacted the high school students this year, it was skipped classes. 30% of those referrals were skipped classes. So that leads me back to what I just talked about in goal 1, the engagement strategies. If kids are engaged in the classroom, they're going to want to be there. I didn't get to dive deep enough yet, but we hope to dive deep into, like, was there certain classes or departments that, that where most of these referrals had come from, because then we can dive deeper into some of that work. So what the high school BLT decided to do for this culture goal is to create like a shared understanding of behavioral expectations, not only for the students, but for the faculty and for the staff as well too. So this is involving our support staff as well too, to make sure that they feel confident enough when they're addressing the students with behavior expectations, or what is expected. So in addition to those engagement strategies, we hope to kind of build upon what Brian is doing with PBIS. We're gonna repurpose. They have the behavioral expectations flowchart, where the minor versus major behaviors, and how a lot of the teachers are taking care of some of that minor stuff in the classrooms or in the hallways or in the lunchroom. We're going to kind of repurpose that to make it fit for the high school purposes. We're going to have student expectations meetings. I typically go into classrooms in the beginning of the year anyways, and kind of just like, hey, set the tone for the school year, but I'm going to focus more on what is expected of students behaviorally, as well as academically. And then we're going to have opportunities to review data using that intervention compass on a more regular basis. Like, so what I have planned right now is bi-weekly. So we're taking a look at maybe kids who hit a certain quota with regards to attendance, absences, referrals, class failures at every given point, which would be the 2 weeks, and kind of figuring out, okay, what can we do, rather than waiting for our RTI meetings, which may take a little bit longer, and we might not have the time to work with those students.
At the middle school, again, supporting the use of data, we're really trying to take a hard look at and to create action plans for some of those students that would be kind of the top of the tier for behavior, the red area. Last year was about 7% of the overall students in middle school, so we want that number in that red triangle at the top to be a lot smaller. But then again, using some of the resources we have, like again, using Synergy, using our PBIS infraction logs, the Aperture, and then Intervention Compass, and trying to tie a lot of the things we're seeing with behaviors, and again, creating some action plans for students who may need it, like a full-blown action plan, or do some students just need some smaller interventions. But again, trying to stay on top of those and moving forward with really taking a hard look at what is the underlying problem, why this student is a behavior problem. Is it academic? Is it SEL? Is it some trauma outside of school? And how can we support them?
So at the district level, one of the things that we'll be doing in order to support this work around behavior, number one will be the use of the RTI MTSS model that Melissa will be working on as the K-12 principal. And I think Christy and Brian spoke to both of those pieces. But in addition to that, the work that the PPS department will be doing with the Aperture social emotional screening, and moving past just a screening and identification, but to actually have set the target of doing actual social emotional lessons to identify groups of students based on where they score in those screeners. These students have a similar need. How do we help meet that need? So to be moving in to the direction where we are explicitly teaching to areas where our students need supports. Before we move on, any thoughts or questions about culture? Okay. All right, so with community, I alluded to this when I went over that kind of master document of the goals. A lot of our focus this year is going to be around making this transition from school tools parent portal to Synergy's parent view. At the middle school and high school levels, this is even more critical because the parents rely on that for finding out assignment completion, current averages, those sorts of things are really, really vital. So we need to make sure that we have that up and running. We need to make sure that we're communicating very clearly to parents about what this is, how it's different, and how do you get in there. We're also going to be very, very explicit in terms of measuring success here. We know who logged in last year and at which point they've logged in. And our idea is to make sure that we haven't lost any users, right? We know there are certain people that say, no thanks, I don't care to use that, and that's okay. But we want to make sure we're taking account of who used last year and who hasn't made the transition and find out why and see if we can support those people. I'll let Christy and Brian go and speak to how at their building level, the specific things that they want to do with the parent communication. But before I do that, just to note, Ellis is going to continue using Seesaw because they made a real commitment to doing that last year, and I think it was a real positive trend for parent communication. Two-way parent communication, right? So parents are able to reach teachers really easily, kind of text message features, that sort of thing. We don't want to take a step back from that, but we want to continue that as a strength.
Matt, just a quick question, Brian, before you start. At this point, have all of the teachers been trained? Because if it's the replacement of school tools, then the teachers also have to load the data, so for the parents to look at.
Yeah, we have a rollout of that coming up on August 30th. There's a train the trainer, and I think we have about 30 teachers that are going to participate in that to the level of where they're agreeing that they'll be a resource for their peers, their colleagues. And then on our first day of Superintendent's Conference Day, we have staff coming in from NARIC that's going to support us in doing trainings. And then after that, we have open labs to support teachers on, hey, if you didn't quite get it in the training, you can pop in here, and so that'll happen during the second half of the day on the 5th, and there'll also be opportunities to go into the lab on the 6th.
And I would just say, let's see, at the 5-week mark, so a week before the 5-week mark, I would encourage you to have extra support.
Yeah.
So in the middle school, one of our thoughts this past year was try to, how can we communicate with our parents, to have that, to improve school to home, home to school communication about a student's academic status through preferred means. And by that, pretty much every parent has an email in our school system, whether it's school tool now Synergy. Many parents don't necessarily utilize it. So we're going to survey parents here in early September and try to get a master list for each grade level to look at as, does this parent prefer just paper copies? Do they prefer, some teachers use different text apps that doesn't necessarily give away their number, but can communicate to parents about what's happening in the classroom. So again, trying to work, it's been one of the things we've noticed on our perception survey that home to school to home communication is an area where we're usually right around a low 3, and that's an area that's probably one of our lowest on our survey that we want to improve upon. So we continue to look at that, and that's the goal for this past year and the action plan we've created as a BLT.
At the high school, we kind of took a spin off of what the Ellis has been doing with Seesaw. At the high school, we want to use Synergy as a single mode of communication. We've heard from a lot of parents, especially those that were on the high school BLT, that they're, especially if you have multiple children at the high school level, like where do you look? Do you look at School Tool? Do you look at Google Classroom? Do you check your email? Like, so there's each teacher had a different method of communicating or a different place where they were putting grades, communication, assignments, things of that nature. So we're going to all retrain our brains with this new student management system that we have, and we're all, everyone at the high school is going to use Synergy as that mode of transfer, that mode of communication. We've already asked ahead, and we can have like a landing page when parents log on to the parent view, and so like that landing page will have like a little bit of like communication on there with regards to like whom to contact if you have questions about transcripts, who to contact if you have questions about, you know, whatever, and there'll be different directions of where people can, you know, contact whoever that they need to contact. Also, we are going to try our best to use the email portion of Synergy. School Tool has the same thing, but Synergy can send out emails, you know, and parents can email right back from Synergy as well too. So rather than having to use, you know, personal emails, everything's right there in the system, and it's kind of in there, so we can say, hey, like, did you ever get my email from last week? Oh, I never got it. Well, it says that it was sent on this day, so there would be a log of that communication as well too. So you don't have to go into your sent or your inbox and kind of search for, you know, the teacher that sent you that email eons ago, and you just can't find it.
Can I ask, so you're still going to use School Tool, or you're still going to use Google Classroom, correct?
That's the teacher's preference, yes,
Okay.
but that won't be their way of communicating with parents.
So for me as a parent, I find it frustrating that I don't know, I don't have my kids log in, and I shouldn't for Google Classroom. It's her world, so whatever. But School Tool isn't always instant.
That's why we're moving away from it.
So this would be up to date more than School Tool was, as far as assignments and grades.
So it depends on how, so that's really up to the teacher. So the teacher, you have to think about it too, like especially at the high school level or any of our special area teachers, if they're teaching 5 different, you know, subjects, they might not grade whatever assignment was just turned in. It is something that we are focused on, and I know it's something I know that we need to improve on as a collective whole. I believe the middle school had tried something, I think you shared it with me, Brian, like they kind of created, like if it's this kind of assignment, try to get it in with this many days. So I did bring it to RBLT, and it's something that we're willing to look at, that they were willing to look at as well too. Great question though, Angela.
Thank you, because I'm a crazy mom, and I don't know if you can see how many times I log into School Tool, but I'm embarrassed if you can.
Were you the one that logged in like 50 times a day?
Probably.
Okay, so next step, so where do we go from here? The teams will go back in and reconvene, finalize their building continuous improvement plans. The administrative cabinet will reconvene and finalize the district continuous improvement plan. Those plans will go to y'all, to the Board of Education for approval. And once they are approved, then the building principals begin communicating with their faculty, right? Some stakeholders were part of this, but not everybody was part of it. So letting everybody know, hey, this is what we're prioritizing this year. These are our strategies for meeting these goals, and this is what we're going to be working on together. And then we move into the action, right? Implementation, and as we implement, there's revision, there's progress monitoring, there's revisiting, there's making improvements. You know, these plans are living documents, and they can be updated and revised as needed as we go. Again, to open up to you, any questions, requests for more information, thoughts?
Matt, so then the information, what we have right here as far as the building as well as the district level, that is a draft that will be updated?
I can't tell what you've got there.
This is the packet of
These
information
are the
that you have.
packet that you provided, so.
Those packets that you have there are the data from last year. So that's the finalization plans at the end of last year,
Okay,
right?
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Couple things, Matt. First, I don't believe I missed a presentation, maybe there wasn't one, but if you could provide, not tonight, but just through email is fine with me and maybe the rest of the board. Comparisons between School Tool and Synergy and what your strengths and weaknesses of Synergy, and then what your ultimate plan for is, or what are you looking to have Synergy do for us? That should be an easy one. Next, Christie, on the curriculum, when I looked at the Regents data that was provided to us months ago, and the results, they are what they are, but you mentioned the 9th graders. My only concern is that whether or not down the road or maybe immediately we're going to have a budget impact, unless they change the Regents requirements, many of those students still going to have to get a science and a math class or Regents passing grade. So I would hope that you would involve your teachers and your departments in developing a plan to get those students where they need to be. I'm sure you will. But.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I thank you for your attention tonight and for your questions and your thoughts and your comments and your feedback. We value it as we plan and as we share these things out and we get an opportunity to kind of let them out into the world. It's excellent to hear other people's ideas or thoughts, or even where you have questions on things, because it helps us to know we maybe need to flesh things out or explain it a little bit better. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to move us along to the discussion, and the first subject will be an update on the library, and I'm going to turn it over to Michael Bennett, our superintendent.
Thank you, Tracy, and I'd like to thank the administrative team for putting together our presentations tonight. Lengthy, but helpful. I'm the one losing my voice. I didn't say a word, so not sure what that's about. But no, to move on to a couple of discussion topics, the first one being the library update. Back on May 30th, we convened a community engagement forum session in regards to some of the concerns around the library. The two questions that we really asked are, we had about 50 people for those for that night. Give us feedback on was the utilization and monitoring of the library spaces, and then provide feedback on the parental oversight for how children take out books. So we had a lengthy document that was posted up on the website to kind of review that night. We took pictures of the discussion topics to make sure that everybody saw what was written on the poster boards. And so the administrative team over the course of the summer has spent some time taking a look at the feedback we got from our community. As you can imagine, was wide-ranging on both sides of the spectrum. So what we did was, short-term to start the school year, what were some areas of concern that we could kind of address? One of the major things that we had heard throughout the course of that night and reading in the notes was the supervision in the library. We had our library meeting specialist who spends her time primarily in this space, but at times will go out into classrooms. So one of the things we heard was that it wasn't another set of eyes in here. So we are going to provide additional resources in the form of a monitor to be in the library full-time that has a good understanding of who the students are currently and will help with oversight of the students and understanding who's checking books out, who's not checking books out. So that is a commitment that we've made for this upcoming school year. The other piece that we took a look at, and may not seem like a huge deal, but our central copier office was in the library office as well. So we took the the opportunity to move where the central copier was and to put in another professional resource in that office, which is Tanya Fricke, who is our educational technology director, who comes to us with 25 years of experience as a library media specialist. So she's K-12, when she's working out of this high school, middle school, she'll be centered in this office, in this area to help to kind of monitor some of those things. So there were a couple of quick things. The other thing we're taking a look at, we heard a lot about permission slips and how we were going to be able to make those available for permission or opt out for what parents can sign on to make sure that they're kind of have an oversight of what their kids are taking out. So we're in the process now of redesigning that slip that will be sent out as part of the communications that go out at the beginning of the school year. Every family gets his group of paperwork from the district into the buildings. We're going to look to include that in that section so that parents and families have access to it, as well as making sure that there is landing on a prominent space within the website to make sure that folks are aware that that's there and taking a look at that. Off of that, we've got Scott taking a look at being able to, as those slips come back in, opt-out slips where parents are saying they would wish that their children not take out some of those YA books, be able to put it into our system so that the folks who are checking out books with the kids will be able to identify that this student is not allowed to take out a YA book. That way parents will have a little bit more insight and ability to really monitor what their children are taking out. So we figure that will be another nice feature that we'll be able to get up and running at the start of the school year. And then the last thing that we're really taking a look at is bolstering some of the selections in the library. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that we had a more well-rounded, faith-filled literature that will allow kids to have different options in regards to what they're able to take out. So really taking a look at our selection of books coming in that are more of a well-rounded opportunities to meet kids where they're at with different options for reading. So there were kind of some of the things that we took off from the get-go, and we'll continue to monitor and take a look at some other adjustments that we can make through the school year. But for the start of the school year, we felt that these were, based off the comments and the engagement session, a good starting point. Any questions?
Mike, regarding the permission slips, so will we be monitoring if a permission slip is missing, hasn't been sent back, so that a follow-up can happen, just the way that when we issue a Chromebook or something like that, we have the permission slip or whatever the necessary paperwork is?
So what we're looking at doing is doing some more of an opt-out slip, which will allow parents to give us that information that they would not like, instead of trying to collect 500 permission slips from our students, trying to put the onus back on the families who are really interested in making sure that their children do not have access to these. That'll be a smaller list than the entire middle school, high school.
Maybe, this is just an idea, maybe because it has been such a hot button issue, maybe have Sierra put out a communication, if you are looking to have a permission slip signed, please do so by whatever date, just in case they miss the paper. I don't know, papers get lost, I lose them all the time.
We can certainly look into doing something like that as well. Any other questions?
I just wanted to thank you, because I know that this has been a topic, it's been going on. I appreciate that you guys stuck to your word and did the work this summer, and I appreciate that you're trying to strike a balance. Thank you.
Thank you.
right, so Mike, you're next on the topic also for the literacy audit.
Yeah, so I wanted to give just kind of an update of where we are at with the literacy audit. Matt has been doing a lot of work with this and has come in and met with Angela and Tracy and I in regards to starting to take a look at the different companies that are out there and the different levels of audit review that they can do. So we're really taking a look at the literacy portion of our curriculum. We're working right now currently with 3 different companies and really trying to take a look at to what depth can these companies come in and do a true audit, give us some feedback in regards to a specific rubric of where we're strong, where our gaps are, and then to be able to give us some ideas of next steps. What we don't want is somebody coming in that is tied to a certain vendor and just looking to push a product. We want to be able to really identify where our needs are. We have in district before the audit really have taken time to look at our and to take a look at different companies and to be able to move away from certain curriculum aspects and moving to, you heard a lot about really great reading. We know that really great reading is a great program for certain kids and it really touches on a lot of different things for us. But what are those gaps that we can piecemeal or maybe not hitting students where their learning is? So we want to make sure that we get some of that feedback. The companies that, or the groups that we're looking at right now that are doing this is CASDA, who did our last audit, and then we're looking at the New Teacher Project, and then the Marzano company. The last 2 that I mentioned are both state and national organizations that can come in and do some of this work. So we will continue to kind of ferret out what will work best for us at a price point that we feel is comfortable. It's a wide-ranging price for the district, anywhere between $8,000 and $55,000. So, you know, it's a big nut to take on for the district, but we're working to see what aspects of the different price comparisons that we can take a look at and move down a little bit. So, I don't know, Tracy, if there's anything else you want to add to that.
I think that some of the information that Matt had provided and really looking at, okay, what exactly are we getting and pushing back and ensuring that the information is useful and not simply, okay, well, here's what you should do. Well, thank you, we knew that. Now let's be specific enough for that to ensure that it's actionable, because at the end of the day, then students are impacted, how can we make the program better, and so forth. And I think that his insight initially was dead on and it was wonderful.
Any other questions? Okay.
I guess one question would be, if we did select one that did work for us, would it be something that maybe other districts close to us, if they went on board and expanded, where it would drop our fee, you know, where it would be balanced? Would that be something that we would look at?
Quite possibly with the 2 national organizations, that may be something that, you know, we know through Questar, there may be coasters that are available that they can kind of sign on to, so we can take a look into that.
Okay.
It's a good suggestion. We'll keep you updated. Thanks.
All right, I'm gonna, let's see, the next topic is a recap of the board goals and objectives that we had. So we met end of July and kind of went through a recap of our 22-23 goals and what we were specifically looking to achieve. And I have them here. I believe that, yes, they are, the new ones are attached. So we decided to still maintain the transparency, the accountability, and the analysis as being the three columns that overall we believe warrants further focus on. And I think that one of the things that we did then is go through and update the actual ways that we can achieve that. So the document that is attached has been shared with everyone, and we encourage for everyone to put their name in if there is something specific that they are interested in. So this year we have under transparency, we have 2 specific ways to accomplish that. One being to continue conducting workshops with the community on a periodic basis. One of the things that we saw that happened this past year is that there was an opportunity to engage in a dialogue with the community on some topics that were perceived as needing further dialogue. So we would envision that there will be other topics as we go along this next year. The workshop mechanism seemed to work very well, depending on what the topic was, and we could foresee continuing with that. Right now I have, let's see, Dave, I have your name down for that one. We also talked about scheduling, we're calling it a coffee hour to meet with the community informally as another mechanism to kind of share just information. And the goal there being more, if someone has an issue, then kind of helping to point them in the right direction and to say, have you approached this? Or what are some of the issues that you're interested in the community? Okay, you know, what is the appropriate venue or way to communicate that within the large organization to be aware of it? We'll need someone, oh, I see Kelly raising her hand. I was hoping. And we also have a third thing on that with the transparency is adding in, we're calling it a BOE corner to the electronic school communication with parents. Angela has had several wonderful ideas on that, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Angela, if you want to talk a little bit about what some of your ideas are there, and then I'll continue with the other columns or elements.
First, I have to say this was not my idea, it was Kelly's idea. I just have a habit of taking on a project and getting tunnel vision. So all I've done so far is kind of chat with her about what she was thinking and kind of made like a little mock-up of what it could look like, but basically it would be kind of letting the public know and just everyone know what the board is doing on a monthly basis. And I did get a list from Sierra of when our e-news and Greenville Pioneer due dates would be for monthly publications. So that's as far as I've really gotten, and just kind of looking for feedback from other board members as far as what they envision that looking like.
So for that, I guess my only question is, do we want to do it monthly or would quarterly? At least when we're initially starting it, do we want to start quarterly? Some of the logistics, you know, writing it and everything else, leveraging people's fortes and so forth. So not necessarily things we have to decide right now, but just questions as we go through. I do have your name on it, if you're okay with that. The second column.
Kelly doesn't want to do it.
Well, she's doing the coffee hour, I've got her down for there. I mean, I can put a slash. For the accountability, then taking and identifying the top 3 priorities for the board, and I think, Eric, we put your name on that for sending out a communication and just saying, okay, to the different board members, how do you see, what do you see as the top 3 priorities, and then taking and condensing that for that. Then we also have under the accountability, the super eval, working with that on the timeline. My name is under that. What I'd also like to do is explore super eval for the board. They also Right now, we're using it as a superintendent's evaluation, but there is a feature that we could evaluate ourselves. So I can find out some of the pricing associated with that, and if that is something that we do want to consider for that. Under analysis, we have fostering knowledgeable and well-informed board members through key personnel orientation. And there, Kelly, can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing as a new board member?
I really appreciate Mr. Bennett's suggestion on this. It kind of got thrown at me, but it's been great. Mr. Bennett gave me a list. He told everybody I'd be contacting them, and over the course of about 3.5 weeks, I had discussions of an hour to an hour and a half or 2 hours even with people in charge of all the different departments. I've met with food services, transportation, buildings and grounds, each of the building principals. The only one I'm still missing is Melissa, but I was letting her get her feet wet first, so I'll be in touch. I met with athletics. I met with, oh my gosh, Matt, Todd for finance. I think I finished with Mr. Bennett, and if I missed you, I'm sorry, but it's been a lot. But it's also been very, very educational. I really got a good idea for where each of those departments is in terms of how they operate and their struggles or their strengths and what they're thinking, and I think it's something each of us needs to do, and so I think that's kind of why it ended up being kind of the, when you get elected to the board, it's a great time for you to go introduce yourself and see how things are going.
And with that, we also have put Eric, since you were recently renominated, then also to go through kind of that system. And what we've been trying to do, I think, with that is between the handbook that was created and so forth, the more knowledge that we have even when we've served for previous years, it just helps in the understanding and the questions and everything else. So it was a great suggestion, so thanks, Mike. We also have, as part of this analysis, we are doing a complete review of our 100 policies right now with the district. In fact, we had a meeting prior to this meeting with going through, and we envision this as being a 3-year process as far as be able to get through all the different policies for that. So that has started, and as we go through, we will be having policies then that are revised, added onto our agenda. So we're trying to figure out how to do it systematically so it becomes kind of a machine in the sense of, okay, this was the policy, here it has been revised with red lines, this was the rationale for why it was done, and so forth. So for each board member, it also becomes manageable and not overwhelming of how many policies are we starting to read and really understand why are we making these changes and so forth. So stand by, stay tuned. And on that we have Tracy, Dave, and Jay working on that. And then I had a last one, evaluate goals of the current committees and recommend changes. That is one element that we said, is this something that would help really with the understanding? So if anyone is interested in that, they can put their name to that. So that's kind of, is that a hand going up? Possibly. All right, I'm going to put you down.
Jim, are you?
I'd be happy to work with you.
That'd be great.
If that works.
Okay, perfect. So there we have it. I will update this and then include it, so if anyone is interested in having this information. But again, like, what are some of the things that we are working on in just trying to improve the overall performance with transparency, accountability, and analysis? Any questions or thoughts? Okay, then committee openings.
Yeah, so we wanted to just kind of get the board an update on where we're at with our 14 committees that we are looking for participation on. And so right now we are looking at Board of Education. You guys are all set. Thank you for volunteering and getting your names and filling those slots on the different committees. We've got 7 openings for parents to be part of different committees, everything from the district level team committee to one at the elementary, middle school, and high school is all set. So our biggest gap right now is with faculty and staff, looking to get some commitments from them. I know Daphne's put out another reminder, taking a look at filling some of those holes. And then we were looking for 4 students for a couple of different committees that once we get back to school, I'm sure we'll be able to get up to speed on. But we're getting there, much better than we were at the reorg meeting. We have many more openings, so we're starting to get to that point where we're filling up the spots. So just wanted to give the board an update on that.
In fact, as we're talking, Mike, maybe that is a possible communication for the first BOE update or whatever. There are some parents, I think, that were a little confused at, I think it was 2 meetings ago when we were talking about some of the committees, and we didn't make it clear that the communication that we had been talking about at that point was specific to board members, but that the opportunities you just mentioned, Mike, for parent involvement and parent representation on those committees still exist. So,
yeah, and I think I asked at that meeting, how are we letting people know what the committees are and what they entail?
It is in board docs. We could promote folks to that to those documents to let them be more aware of what the committees are and what the charge is of those committees.
Mike, one of the other things we could do, I think we could probably contact the PTA and the PTSA and get that out, because I know until last year on the PTSA, I mean, I knew of a couple of those committees. I didn't know there were parent openings on the others. So I can definitely reach out to them, or if you want to do it, but those are good starting points.
Great, thank you.
okay, and we have the draft 24-25 budget development calendar. Hard to believe, but the budget development process will soon be here.
Yeah, so it's really really no break for the business office when we start to take a look at budget, where we start to get our ducks in a row for the 24-25 school budget. So what you've got in tonight is just kind of a draft of that. Kind of it mirrors pretty much what we've done in the past, but we will look to have more of a review of this at our September 18th board meeting, and then ultimately adopt the budget at the October 16th board meeting. Before that, we will have a little conversation around the development of the guidelines for developing the budget. We'll do that during the week of October 10th through or October 2nd through the 6th. So it's just really kind of the draft, get your eyes on it, kind of wrap your head around how we kind of jump into things as early as November, with team leaders and department chairs starting to submit their budgets to principals. At the same time, the administrators are working on their operations and maintenance needs. So take a look. It's pretty similar to years past, but just want to make sure the board kind of had a preview here in August, so we start to take a look at the process of developing the calendar moving forward. More to come.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to move this on to our action items. So I need a motion I'm going to combine 7.1 and 7.2. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the July 10th, 2023 organizational meeting, as well as the July 10th business meeting on the same date.
Eric and Kelly?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I need a motion to accept the Committee on Special Education recommendations.
Angela and Jim?
Any discussion? Bless you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I need a motion to approve the finance reports for the month ending June 30th, 2023 and July 31st, 2023.
Angela, need a second? Eric?
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the personnel agenda.
Eric and Jim?
Any discussion?
Good question. The agenda includes abolishing the science teacher position. Mike, could you just discuss the motivation behind that? What you
Sure.
reasoning behind that?
Yep, as we take a look every year at what our enrollment numbers look like, we make decisions based on what students are asking. In this particular case, we had a science teacher that was, through the course of his 4 sections, had about 23 students total, and looking to condense and try to make better use of our resources. We decided that given that aspect with smaller enrollment in the school in general, and we were able to fill those other classes without needing a science teacher, so we could use those resources elsewhere.
Thanks. I know I asked about the science teacher specifically, but there are 2 other positions also being abolished. If you could just explain that also.
Yep, so the other piece was ENL, which it is a more cost-effective use of school districts wanting to use Questar service for this because it does not take on, we do not incur the cost of a person. It's really the Questar service that we'll pay for that. We have a limited number of students there. And then again, same thing with the elementary school position. As we discussed last spring, our numbers decreasing allowed us to eliminate a section of at the elementary school.
And is there anyone who needs to recuse themselves from the vote?
No. I know I'm being appointed. It's a volunteer position. I'm not being.
Any more questions? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the district safety plan for the 23-24 session.
Angela, I need a second. Jim?
Any discussion? So the one change is to add the parent to that? That is correct, okay. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Need a motion to establish the tax warrant for the 23-24.
Jim and Jay?
Any
No,
questions?
Eric and
Sorry.
Jay, sorry.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the increase in breakfast and lunch rates for adults as of September 1st, 2023 per the New York State Child Nutrition Management System. Breakfast are going to $3.07 and lunches are going to $5.34.
Eric, I need a second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to accept the 23-24 bus routes.
Angela? Eric?
Any discussion?
Mike, can you just, we've gone down again? Is that what that is? We're condensing more routes? It seems smaller than last year.
I believe that is yes, yep. So as Janet just mentioned, it is not due to enrollment, it's due to shortage of drivers. which, by the way, is making national news right now if you're paying attention. School districts across the country are having to shut down. I understand a school district in Kentucky had kids out until 10 o'clock at night because they had a new company, bus route came in, and they just can't find drivers. It's not routing correctly. A lot of issues right now. We are concerned.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I need a motion to approve the contract transportation extensions for special education routes for the 23-24 school year.
Jim, Eric,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to award the contract transportation bids to Kasaki Transport for the 23-24 school year to transport students to the Questar 3 George Washington School, Rensselaer Education Center, and Crossroads Center for Children, Oak Hill School.
Jim, Angela,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the Questar 3 initial service contract with the Greenville Central School District for the 23-24 school year.
Kelly and Eric,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the contract between the Greenville Central School District and Steve Zotner as internal claims auditor for the 23-24 school year.
Jim, Eric,
Any discussion?
Yes. We had previously had some discussion and questions regarding the contract. If I remember correctly, there was going to be discussion between some members of the board and Mr. Zautner, but that hasn't happened yet, correct?
We tried to set up a meeting with the audit committee, was unable to do so, so they furnished questions to Steve, and Steve answered those questions, and I sent them back out to our audit committee as we received them. Part of the issue, I think, with the initial contract was that there was some obvious missing pieces to that contract, which he has since corrected and made sure that he had all the information in that contract.
Okay. And I think that regarding the contract, there's also discussion of, I think we had a consensus of tweaking the mutual indemnification language. Was that discussed with Mr. Zautner also?
I am not sure if that was.
Looking at you, but I don't know how much of this is like to who is on the audit committee or not, but was there, if not, why not?
That may fall on me.
I think it was an oversight right now as far as the indemnification part goes.
Yeah.
I think the contract's okay for now. I mean, if we need greater indemnification in the future, we can get it. Or I asked someone else about indemnification, they were like, okay, that's pretty normal. But you're an attorney, so speak up.
Well, I'm not a contract attorney and I'm not the district's attorney, so I believe that the normal indemnification clause often does also include what we talk about adding, which is say that although we'll indemnify each other if there's a claim, that the district wouldn't have to defend Mr. Zautner if the claim arises from his negligence, and he wouldn't have to defend us if the claim arises from the district's negligence. And I think that that's a standard part of, that's often a standard part of an indemnification clause. I thought that we had a consensus to add that in before. If I'm mistaken about that, please let me know, but I would prefer to see that language in, and I think that it would be better to get that in before we approve it than to say, again, if there's agreement that we added in, that we just punt and do it at a later time.
Jay, did you review the latest contract?
I did.
Mike had sent to us?
I did.
You didn't find that there?
Well, it had a standard indemnification clause, but it didn't have the additional language that we talked about. And this is, I mean, to be clear, I think the risk is low. It's really, it really only goes to the instance where there is a claim arising from, say, his negligence. We don't want to have to defend him. You know, if it's a claim that would trigger the indemnification, but it arises from his negligence, we don't have to defend him, you know, for that, or vice versa. You know, I think it works in his favor too.
Jay, could that be added, could that be an addendum later, or would approving it today make that not possible?
We could agree to modify it, but I think it would be better to do it, you know, initially. Is there a reason why it has to be approved today? I mean, I think maybe jumping in. Pardon?
He won't be paid, and he's been working.
He's been working. It's the only way we pay our bills is he looks at it.
So he's been working without a contract?
We have to pay
Yes.
our bills.
No, I understand we have to pay the bills, but, I mean,
Yes,
He's been paying-
he could shut down and not do the work because he doesn't have a contract, but he hasn't. He continues to do the work.
are we meeting again later in the month?
At this point, we did not see a need. We don't have personnel normally during the course of the last month of August. Is usually for personnel hires before the start of the school year. We don't see any at this point that we're going to need to. That may change.
Okay. One more question, I guess, to the audit committee. What questions did you ask? What information did you get from Mr. Thaler? I don't remember what questions were sent to you.
I had two questions, and with regard to the first question was the difference between needing more information and versus a true finding for claim. And he explained the difference to me, which was my question to ask if he knew what he was doing effectively. He said, yes, he does. He's a smart guy. And then the second question that I had asked was, why have we not seen any findings for, since he's been involved? And he didn't have an answer for that because he has not found any, but our previous internal auditor had. So he invited me to go back and sit down and talk with him if he wants to in the future. But he didn't have an answer to the second question of why there's no findings or why they decreased. Because for him, he hasn't found any.
Okay. One more question for the board. I just would like to revisit that question of the additional indemnification language. Was, again, I thought that there was consensus to include it, but there wasn't really, I think, I don't know if that was a misunderstanding on my part or if there was agreement. Does anyone have an opinion?
My thoughts, Jay, were that the original contract we saw at the last meeting was there was no indemnification part of it at all. It was deleted. So then that generated for me, I submitted no questions to Mike because the indemnification had been included in the new contract. I thought that satisfied the board's concerns, although an answer was not provided as to why, whether it was a clerical thing or some other issue with not including that in the original contract.
If I remember correctly, it was the scope of services that wasn't in what we had seen, but it had the indemnification clause. And what we talked about was, adding in the scope of services and adding to the indemnification clause that was there. The why wasn't included, I'm not so worried about. It's just more about adding it. My preference would be to add in language before we approve it. I'm not hearing any great interest from anyone else. So I would move to table this to try to add in the language, but I do that with the expectation, based on the discussion so far, that I will be voted down. And I know that's a compelling argument to vote in favor of it, but be that as it may.
Any other questions or comments?
Is this something we can get changed without having a formal meeting, where we can possibly communicate to the district or to have updated or changed to the language that Jay is stating?
I think so. I think that we could, if he'd agree to it, we could probably modify the contract after we approve it. But that again is if the board wanted to do that. In other words, wanted to add the language to it. And I'm not, yes, I'm asking to pause or to do that. However, as I said, I feel I'm a little hesitant because I recognize that it's, trying to address a low risk, a low likelihood, but higher risk issue. It's unlikely to happen, but if it does, then we'd want to have that language in place.
Having the carve-out is standard with pretty much all of the contracts, if you're looking at the contracts. So, but I also understand we need to pay the bills for that. So, and he hasn't gotten paid. So it's kind of a balancing act. I would be comfortable saying next year, because it's an annual contract, we should be using our standard indemnification language. I don't understand why it's different. That would be my recommendation.
And
I
I'm
would
not
be
opposed
comfortable
to
with that.
adding it. I'm not saying don't add it, I'm just saying right now it is what it is.
How about somebody makes a motion to approve the contract on the fact that that indemnification clause will be
Change.
yes. And if we have a motion, we have a second.
Okay.
I don't think we could vote to change it because it would have to be discussed with him, have to agree to it. So I think what we could do is say, we'll approve the contract, but want the board to take the extra step of trying to discuss that additional language with him to see if he'd be amenable to modifying the contract to include it.
Next year.
Do you want it this year or for next year?
I'd want it this year.
Okay, so then you need to make a
Okay.
Sorry, so
So
then we need to
I'll
make a
withdraw my motion
motion.
to table it. I'll move to that we approve the contract as it is, subject to discussion with Mr. Zautner to add that additional language to the indemnification clause to modify the contract that we're approving tonight. In other words, whether that happens next month, I think it's straightforward, it's a small change. I'd be a little surprised if he pushes back, but I obviously can't speak for him. But I would suggest that we try to have that conversation and decision in the next month, so that by our next business meeting, we have an answer. He agrees to it or he doesn't.
Well, but to have the discussion, it would be a matter of, we're making a motion to revise the contract to include it, right?
I think
So it would be done tomorrow. So it's not next month, if I'm understanding correctly. So if someone seconds that motion,
I'll second the motion.
okay, any discussion on that motion, revising the contract to include the standard indemnification language with basically the carve-out? So that's what is on the table right now. Yes, no, maybe so.
So wait, we are not voting on to approve his contract right now. That's what's happening?
We're voting
To modify.
Voting
We
to
are
modify.
voting
Okay.
to
So
modify.
we're not approving it tonight, if we modify.
Yes, we will be approving it
Okay,
It will
with
be.
the modification. That's what's the motion that is on the table.
okay.
Does
As
that
long
make
as he
sense?
accepts it, then it's approved.
He's not gonna have a problem with it.
Right.
Right.
Right. Okay, so everyone's comfortable with that motion?
Yes.
All in favor? Aye.
I know it's
Okay.
I know it's painful getting to that point, but thank you for talking through it.
Got it. Thank you.
Now we're gonna approve the contract.
Now we have to approve.
Now we have to, okay, so now I need a motion to approve the contract
That's just been modified.
that's just been modified, thank you very much, between the Greenville Central School District and the Internal Claims Auditor for this year.
Okay, so we have Jay.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Just, he still needs to approve of this because we've changed it without his input at all.
Correct. He's
Correct.
gonna have to decide to sign it or not. Yes.
Right.
We can
I'll get
it from
Yep.
Jeff.
Okay.
Tracy has to reach out, right?
Yeah, I've got the language. I need a motion to approve.
I need a motion to approve the contract between the Greenville Central School District and Oak Hill School for summer, as well as the school year for the 23-24.
All sorts of people. Angela and Jay.
Did someone make a motion?
Yeah, I have Angela and Jay.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the contract between the Greenville Central School District and Advanced Therapy PLLC for therapy services at the rate of $600 per evaluation for the 23-24 school year.
Jay, need a second? Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the contract between the Greenville Central School District and Center for Spectrum Services for the school year program July 1st, 23 through June 30th, 24.
Kelly, need a second? Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the contract between the Greenville Central School District and Columbia Memorial Hospital for school physician services for the 23-24 school year.
Eric and Jim?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the health and welfare services contract between the Greenville Central School District and the City School District of Albany for the 22-23 school year.
Eric? Angela?
Any discussion?
Yes. I saw a lot of year 22 dates in the contract.
That is, it's the one that just passed. And the contract says that they will invoice us in July, payable 60 days. So
We're paying last year?
that is correct.
That's-
Yes, and the contract specifically says
Yes.
we're going to invoice us, they just did.
After the year ends?
Correct.
Right, just making sure everything's working right.
Well, how do we budget that?
So every year, we kind of know how many, who we paid the previous year, and how many students go to the previous year, so we estimate.
Okay.
So there was a purchase order done to the city of Albany, I think it was in September of '22, what year are we in? Yeah, September of '22, to hold that aside, so we didn't spend it, because we know we have children going to private schools in the city of Albany. They just take forever to bill.
Okay.
We didn't vote on it, right?
No,
So
I have the
okay,
first
so
and second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Jim? Thanks.
I need a motion to approve the change order MC001 in the amount of $9,500 to RMB Mechanical Inc. for the increased cost of the dust collector equipment due to project timeline adjustments.
Do we want to do both of those? If
Sure.
anybody is not opposed, we'll do both of those and
Okay, so I'm going to combine that motion with the change order MC002 in the amount of $42,000 to the same company, RMB Mechanical Inc., for the general construction work to support the mechanical scope, including the roof and the wall penetrations.
Eric, need a second? Jim?
Any discussion?
Yep. Don't laugh, Kelly.
On which one?
Is there a contingency on this, on the capital project for this particular work? Or, my question really is, where's the money coming from?
It is coming from the 23-24 budget line, transfer to capital for $125,000, because we knew that the dust collector was going to be increased in price due to the timeline, what happened to it, that we couldn't get it done earlier. So we knew there were going to be price increases. So during budget time, We talked about it and put $125,000 into transfer to capital to help the dust collector project.
So they added 50-some $1,000 just because of timeliness?
The 9,500 is,
And the 42,000 is?
it's the general contractor work, which we never approved to anybody. We bid it out, but the contractor was a single contractor, and we weren't, we just didn't accept their bid. So
Okay,
R&B
so that
now
was
is doing the general contracting work also.
But that was in the scope of work?
Yes.
Okay. You're off the hook then. Not really.
It's my last meeting.
All right, any,
Oh, that's,
you made him smile, so that's good. Any other questions? All in favor?
aye.
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 I need a motion to approve the surplus items of textbooks and a bicycle.
I need a second. Angela, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Input items for discussion at future meetings. Does anyone have any thoughts? We can leave that for next month. Just a quick reminder, we have a couple of dates coming up. We did tentatively say, potentially, August 28th, having a meeting if there are HR needs. It doesn't sound like there are going to be, so we don't need it, but we just wanted people to tentatively put a pencil hold if necessary. So should they remove it, Mike?
What's that?
I'd leave it,
Leave it for now?
just in case.
All right, stay tuned.
All right, so just pencil it in for them, please. September 11th, we have the tour of facilities that will begin here at 6 p.m. And then we have our regular business board meeting on September 18th. So hard to believe that the start of the school year is right around the corner, but it is. Okay, and then closing open forum, please note the same guidelines apply as stated during the first open forum. Is there anyone that would like to speak? No. Do we have any emails?
No.
No.
Can I just mention, Janet kind of stole the thunder here, but I would just like to recognize Janet that this is her final official Board of Education meeting. I do want to just thank the Board of Education for offering her an additional contract here to help keep the business office. As you know, Janet has done double, sometimes triple the work since, I don't know, November, covering both the business office and the treasurer as we've gone through some different iterations of treasurer down in that office. Janet has been a rock. She has been unbelievable. I can tell you that if you look at her steps on her watch, she is going way up in steps, going up and down the stairs to do that. But she's done an amazing job in the time that I've been here. I will truly miss you professionally and personally, being right next door. I've learned a lot from you, and I just publicly want to thank you for all that you've done for Greenville, all you've done for the Board of Education, and most significantly for me, what you've done for me. You will be missed. Todd's got some big shoes.
So we just thought that you would want to use some of those hours at night.
No.
All right, I tried. Oh, kidding aside, Janet, thank you for everything you have done and also for training. I think that really being willing and just open-hearted from that perspective and sharing all your information and your knowledge and everything else, we are very grateful for that, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, then I have a motion. Okay, then I have a motion will be made to adjourn to executive session to seek legal advice, which we made privileged by law. Okay.
Sorry.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
That's my thought.
So
All
I'm
right,
handing
that's it.
around the tax warrant. I need everybody to
All right.
sign your name, please. And everybody voted